Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and time for the Tuesday, May 10th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners of Indian River County to begin. We're going to start with an invocation by Philip Katrovitz of the Humanist of the Treasure Coast, and that'll be followed by the pledge led by myself. Please rise.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I would like to thank the Commission for inviting me here on behalf of the Humanists of the Treasure Coast. It's a real honor, and I certainly look forward to it. And I'd like to thank you, Commissioners, the citizens of Indian River County, and all those present for this opportunity to share an inspirational opening to your meeting. Often at this time, you are asked to bow your heads. Instead, I ask you to lift your head up and look around. Turn your attention to this room. A room that has heard countless discussions, frustrations, and successes. A room where important decisions regarding our county are routinely made. Take a moment to soak the presence of the men and women in this room, gathered at this time and place to engage in their civic duty. Yes, they are here to contribute and work towards creating a better community. Imagine the large number of people who are also affected by the ideas shared here. Let all voices be heard and understood equally. It is often customary to read from a book during an invocation, and today will be no different. I'll be sharing a quote from J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, in which Professor Albert Dumbledore said, "Differences of habit and language are nothing at all if our aims are identical and our hearts are open." I love this when I read it. I'll repeat it again. Differences of habit and language are nothing at all if our aims are identical and our hearts are open. Although our differences may be many, we are bound together in similarity as members of the human species. As humans, we have the capacity to appreciate and thank each other, to utilize compassion and reason in our decision making. I ask those present to join me in showing gratitude to the men and women who serve this great community. We need only to look at each other for guidance and to work together to overcome our challenges that we may face. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Ladies.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. Gentlemen, I'll ask if there are any additions and deletions to the agenda.
Move to approve as presented.
Just one possible alteration. Was told that the county administrator, well, we can see Jason Brown's here today, but on the county administrator matters dealing with health insurance subsidy for retirees, Mr. Brown wanted Mr. Baird to be here, and he's expected somewhere between about 9:30 or 10. So if we get to that item prior to Mr. Baird's arrival, I'd like the board's forbearance to pushing it off until later in the agenda.
That's fine with me, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve. It's been seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes. Passes 5-0.
Really?
Close enough. Anybody want to mention anything from the information items? That's your cue.
Did we want to do proclamations and presentations first?
No, I don't want to skip those today. You wanted me to get out of here.
Oh,
early,
okay,
so-
all right.
Well,
Well, let's see, we're on the
Chairman,
in that case,
special districts and boards.
In that case, we'll go to proclamations and presentations. We'll begin with the presentation of a proclamation designated in the week of May 8th to 14th as Tobacco-Free Florida Week. Commissioner Zork is going to present this to Leslie Spurlock of Quit Doc Foundation.
Good morning. I'll read the proclamation and I'd like to hear a few words from you afterwards. This is a proclamation designated the week May 8th to the 14th, 2016 as Tobacco-Free Florida Week. Whereas, even though Florida has made substantial strides in the progress of a smoke-free policy, Floridians are still involuntarily affected by secondhand smoke's toxic chemicals, significantly increasing the risk of lung cancer, Florida's #1 cancer killer. And whereas, in the United States, 2 of 5 children ages 3 to 11 are exposed to secondhand smoke, and 39.7% of Florida high school students and 35.9% of Florida middle school students reportedly being exposed to secondhand smoke in a room or car in the past week. And whereas comprehensive smoke-free policies not only protect people from secondhand smoke, but they also denormalize tobacco use, encouraging more smokers to quit and fewer youth to ever start. And whereas the best way smokers can protect their loved ones from secondhand smoke is to quit smoking. Since 2007, more than 126,000 Floridians have successfully quit tobacco using One Tobacco-Free Florida's 3 free and easy ways to quit. Now therefore be it proclaimed by the Board of County Commissioners, Indian River County, Florida, that the week of May 8th through the 14th, 2016 be designated as Tobacco-Free Florida Week in Indian River County, signed by all 5 county commissioners. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much. Tobacco-Free Florida Week, this is our 8th annual, and it's become more and more important in the last decade. As it was said, a lot of people still do not know the dangers of secondhand smoke, and they kind of, think it's a little harmless, but it's far from harmless. Breathing even small amounts of secondhand smoke can be very dangerous. You mentioned the high school students who were exposed to secondhand smoke, perhaps in their home or their car. Well, 17% of Indian River's middle school students are exposed to secondhand smoke in the public. And lung cancer is not only Florida's #1 form of terminal cancer, but it's also #1 here in Indian River County. Non-smokers exposed to secondhand smoke at home or work increase their risk of developing heart disease by 25 to 30%, and their risk of stroke by 20 to 30%. Even if there's not a smoker in your home and you live in a multi-unit building, secondhand smoke can enter the home through doorways, cracks in the walls, electrical, plumbing, and even to other units and floors above. In fact, more than 40% of children who go to emergency rooms for asthma attacks live with a smoker. So in Indian River County, our tobacco-free partnership is really trying to raise awareness about secondhand smoke. And we also work to help guide other organizations through the process of going smoke-free or tobacco-free. And I have some of those organizations with me today, and I'd like to recognize them. They are leaders in the area of secondhand smoke and becoming tobacco-free workplaces. Chive Restaurant, who can't be here today, is tobacco-free. They don't hire people who use tobacco, and they also have tobacco-free patios. Courtyard Villas, who is co-owned by Steve Rennick, they are smoke-free. There are very few places in the county that people can find a residence that is smoke-free. Indian River Medical Center is another one of our partners who has gone totally tobacco-free environment for all their patients and employees. They also do not hire people anymore that use tobacco. The Senior Resource Association has 2 tobacco-free campuses. And Piper Aircraft now provides a tobacco-free work environment for their employees. Treasure Coast Community Health Center established tobacco-free campuses in all of their locations. And last but not least, the school district of Indian River County is completely tobacco-free. So I'd like to recognize those people if they want to come up here and join me, especially joining me to receive the proclamation from the county. Medical Center. So I'd like you to see what leadership we have here in Indian River County. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hey, Leslie, a quick question, if I may. I just read where the FDA said they're going to regulate e-cigarettes now as a tobacco product. So I take that as good news because now it'll fall under the Florida Clean Indoor Air Act and those type of things?
We don't know that it's going to do that yet. The feds still have to make all of their rules and regulations, and whether it comes down to the state or not. We are actually happy that electronic cigarettes are not under the Clean Indoor Air Act, because the Clean Indoor Air Act has preemption. When I present to you just a few minutes from now, I'll talk about that too.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Your partner? Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations.
And Ms. Spurlock, if you want to stay at the podium, we can move right into your presentation.
Yes, please. Teresa? Thank you. Yes, I'm really very, very pleased also to be recognizing the County Commission for supporting tobacco control policies. Your support is really critical to protect our local citizens. Each supportive act, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance, decreases pro-tobacco influences in our county. In this state, we have a preemption clause and various legal opinions about Florida's Clean Indoor Air Act that prevents local governments from enacting stronger local secondhand smoke laws. However, it does not prevent you from creating ordinances, laws, policies, resolutions that dictate the time, manner, and place in which tobacco is sold. Did you know Florida was the tobacco industry's test case for using preemption to tie the hands of local citizens and their governments? The tobacco industry does not have the resources to fight local control policies, so they use preemption at the state level. You have demonstrated support with a resolution against flavored tobacco. You demonstrated common sense with an ordinance placing electronic cigarettes behind the counter and setting an age limit of 18 or over to purchase them, even before the state did. You were proactive, and you did this before the feds took action too. Decreasing these types of pro-tobacco influences can't be done without local support. In honor of your role in protecting the health of county residents, we have a plaque honoring you too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look at that. Thank you. To you, sir. Oh, wonderful. Thank you very much. Nice side shot. Do you want to get your picture taken?
No.
Oh, this side.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here you go.
We will now move to a presentation by Michelle Dion and Kim Prado of Marine Bank and Trust on volunteer opportunities for the 2016 Vero Beach Air Show on June 25th and 26th of 2016. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. How's everybody this morning?
Great.
Thank you for giving us the opportunity to come in. My name is Kim Prado, and this is Michelle Dion. And yes, we are with Marine Bank. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the upcoming air show. The air show is June 25th and 26th for this summer. This year we're ramping up. We're preparing for about 50,000 people to show up for the air show. Last year we had about 35,000, so the word is out. And we had more marketing dollars this year too to expand our marketing information. This is our third air show. We had some struggles along the way. You know, it's a learning opportunity for all of us, but each year we've made it bigger and better, and we're hoping to continue with that going forward. Some of the new things that we've added this year is part of what the Blue Angels want when they come into a community is two things. They need to have a visit with students, some of the local schools, and they also have to have some type of community event, which is usually like a museum or art shows, type of things like that. Well, this year, summer, there's no school, so we had to be a little creative. So with the help of the Boys and Girls Club, Gifford, Youth Guidance, and Masters Academy, I reached out to them, and we have about 120 students that are going to be meeting them at Piper. It's going to be at a lunchtime, and they're going to have that opportunity to meet them and greet them. They're going to get an autographed program with the Blue Angels signature. So we took care of that. The other thing that we had to do is we had to come up with some type of meet and greet for the community, for the public. So we came up with the meet and greet. It's going to be at the Riverside Park. It's called our Food Frenzy, our Food Fest. We're partnering with the Buggy Bunch. So they are already ramping out with getting food trucks coming and everything. That we're expecting anywhere from about 4,000 to 5,000 people coming for that. And that's going to be about 70 of the Blue Angels team is going to be there, you know, mingling in with the community and talking to them about the wonderful things that they're doing through the Blue Angels. And let's see, what did I...
Kim, when is that event going to be at the park?
That event is Saturday night, which is the 25th. And it's from 5:30. The Blue Angels will have a little presentation to do on stage. There's going to be a live band there. And we're going to have some other activities there for the children. It's a free event. So I would recommend you get there early because parking might be get full quick. So I would recommend you highly that you get there early. Last year, I just want to share with you that the Vero Air Show, we wrote 4 $25,000 checks from the proceeds from the air show. Our air show is a nonprofit, so you know, we're all about giving it back into the community. $25,000 went to the Veterans Council, and $25,000 went to Treasure Coast Exchange, which I'm proud to say Leslie is part of that club with me. And then Vero Beach Exchange and Indian River Exchange. We were the ones that got it going and you know, got that initial air show started back in 2013. Not to mention the dollars that were generated back into the community through hotels, restaurants, retail shopping. It was amazing. All of the restaurants and hotels were just like, wow, this was just incredible, the feedback that we got from that. Last year, I was asked to put 500 people in the concession booths. How the concession booths work is if you're working a novelty booth, which is your hats and your shirts and all of that stuff, you get 8% of the gross sales. If you're working a food booth, you get 10% of the gross sales. So I had the challenge of finding 500 people to fill those booths. Well, I'm proud to say that I actually had 540 that we put in those booths. They were so appreciative of those extra dollars that they got, plus they got to see the show. You know, they had some team building at the same time. This year, I was asked to bring on the volunteer piece of it. So I said, okay. So I said to myself, how hard can that be? Well, I didn't think it was going to be that difficult until, as a board, which I'm the secretary of, they gave me the number of 800 people. That's 400 per day. So I've reached out to Michelle Dion, because I know she knows a lot of people in this community. And we have been hitting the pavement. We're looking for volunteers. We need as many volunteers as we can get to make this a successful air show. 800 people is putting it on the light side. Last year we had about 450 between the 2 days, and we felt it. So this year with that additional attendance, we really want to make sure that we've got the coverage to make it a very successful air show. Also, the churches were very big on stepping up and helping me out with the concession booths. And I'm proud to say that this year, we just made phone calls, and we had them booked. The concession booths have been booked now for about 4 months. So next year, I've got a waiting list. But what we're going to do next year is something a little different. If they want to work a booth, they have to give something back to us and give us 2 volunteers to help in other areas. So that will help the load of getting the additional people. Our community is very well known for its generosity and its support. So I'm asking for your help. Get the word out there for us. If you know of anybody, send them to Michelle. She works at the beach office. I happen to run the US 1 office. I'm the branch manager there. But we're working this together. I couldn't do it without her. And you can go onto the website, which is veroairshow.com. The form is there. She's tweaked it. It's very easy, very user-friendly. Fill it out and submit it. It will go to Michelle. So again, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to come in here and share with you all that's going on with this wonderful air show. We are already planning for the 2018 year. We've already been working about 10 months of planning on this, so it's not something that can be put together quickly. And we've already are talking about starting to prepare for the 2018. Thunderbirds are looking at us, so we might be getting the Thunderbirds sometime soon. So it's all good. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Kim?
Yes, sir.
If I may, is the only way to volunteer through the website?
Well, the form itself is through the website, but we can get you some hard copies.
Well, if somebody was listening and they were interested, is there a number they should call?
Oh,
or
yes.
Just
Yes, they can call Michelle directly, and her number is 772-473-5154, or you could reach out to either one of the Marine Bank offices. Everybody on my staff and at the beach office as well are ready for the calls and can give you the direction on where to go.
And could you give the web address again?
Yes, veroairshow.com.
Thanks. And Jason, Joe, you're back. Would it be possible to put this on the website for a bit?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Oh, thank you so much.
God will put it on for you.
Thank you, everyone.
I just have a few questions, too.
Right. Just to kind of put this in perspective, 500 to 800 community volunteers. You've got the board of the air show that's been meeting for the last 2 years, really, since this has gone on. The thousands of hours they've put in, the supporters, the underwriters, the people doing ticket sales, and not one person in this whole process is paid. They're 100% volunteer effort because the money goes back into the community, and that's just an outstanding effort, and you guys really should be commended for the hard work that you do.
Oh,
Coming up
thank
to
you.
500 to 800 volunteers, that's
I know.
that's a huge task, but I'm sure you'll do very well at it. And the prior event, the Saturday night event, is really just going to make it, a whole weekend activity for the entire community. So we're looking forward to that. And who are we going to put in charge of weather?
I'll handle that.
Oh, I know.
I can do that.
It is weather sensitive, but
Yeah.
we will do our best in the weather department.
All right, thank you again.
Just real quick, as far as the volunteers, you said all your vending booths, as far as the food, are already manned?
Yes.
Okay. And so you're looking for people to direct traffic, you're looking for people to just, and so I'm assuming the products, like the T-shirts, hats, and all that kind of stuff, you're looking for people to still fill those booths, or those full, or?
No, that's part of our concessions.
So-
And those are completely booked.
Okay.
I need help with registration, ticket checking, the program sales, parking attendance, which, by the way, we've worked it out to where they will work 2-hour shifts. We'll pull them out and then put them back, so it's not like they're going to be there all day.
Okay.
And we've got water runners that we need. We've got hydrating stations put in place, thanks to the Red Cross for that. But it's endless. Garbage, people to make sure the garbage is emptied out on a regular basis and that the grounds stay clean. Handicap assistance, flight line attendants to make sure that there's no smoking going on during the air show, and that the security is secure along the perimeter of the fence line. We've got the Go Line bus is going to be transporting, because last year we had a problem with we had more people than parking spaces. So we did bring in a consultant company, and now we have 10 parking areas. So we need people to attend those, and that's what's going to make it a pleasurable experience for the people coming and going.
So I guess really ultimately what I'm trying to get from you then is it's not necessarily that you will still take large groups that want to have come and volunteer as a group, and you can put them
Yes.
individually somewhere else. But if somebody as an individual just wanted to participate in this, they could just be a one-man operation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
Is there an age
absolutely.
limit also?
We'd like them to be 14 and up.
Oh, great. So that opens for the scouts. and-
Yes. So those teenagers, those grandkids and stuff you have out there, send them our way.
Put them to work.
We'll put them to work, and it's amazing. It really is. We've got some wonderful statics set up. Our performers are all in place. I mean, we really have come a long way this year, and it's just going to be a fantastic show. So please just help us out, and I appreciate all that you're doing to help us get the word out there.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, several months ago, an advanced Blue Angels team flew in to go over some of the logistics of getting everything organized. And at the meeting afterwards, I spoke up and I took the liberty of speaking for the board. But I told them that we wanted them to fly low, we wanted them to fly fast, and we wanted them to fly loud, and that the
I
board.
heard about that.
The board would have their back. So gentlemen, I hope I'm speaking for all of us, but
Absolutely.
I see that as the sound of freedom. And right when they came was just right after the terrorist attacks in Italy. And you have to think about it. Over in Europe now, when they hear a loud bang or a loud noise, they're all ducking under tables and running for cover. I want this community to know when they hear a loud noise, they're looking up in that sky and they're hearing the sound of freedom. So they're going to fly loud, they're going to fly fast, and I'll take all the complaint calls, gentlemen. if anybody gets any.
I'm going to break out my Tervis tumbler for the weekend. I'm not going to use glass.
Exactly.
That's right.
Well,
a
the
great show.
saying, the British were coming, the British are coming. Well, we're hearing that. The Blue Angels are coming, the Blue Angels are coming. And, we're feeling that excitement in the air. I seriously think last year they did not believe us, that they were actually coming until they heard them, because you cannot mistake that sound.
Right.
And so this year they're believing us, and sponsorships, we're still taking sponsorships if people want to get involved with that on that side of it. But it's just very exciting, and we can already feel that rumble in the community. And ticket hubs are already set up so people can purchase tickets. They can go online and purchase tickets. Our ticket sales are going very, very well. So again, we're just very excited, and we look forward to doing it again.
Is there a point at which you will be sold out of tickets? Is it? I mean.
The Saturday we have a ticket. It's called Barnstormer. They're $99 tickets, but that includes you're in a tent. You get some food with that, and those we have 800 seats that we put out there. And the last time we looked, we were about 60 to 70% sold already for the Saturday.
That's awesome.
So Sunday, once Saturday fills up, then Sunday will start filling up as well. But it's just wonderful when you can feel that give back to the community. When you talk about that 100,000 that went out from the air show, and then all the money that went into those nonprofits. I mean, I'm talking little Boy Scout troops. I'm talking Girl Scout troops.
Sure.
I'm talking churches that were just so happy to have those funds that came their way.
Good.
So,
One last thing, Mr. Chairman.
First, Commissioner Fletcher.
You said that you were doing rather well with the volunteer efforts, and I didn't hear it from the board, so I'll take this opportunity, because we appreciate it, of being invited to see the event and to be with the people and the Blue Angel members. But I think that there's a basic desire here of volunteerism. And if you fall short in any area, I see at least 5 here, plus we can count on our attorney and our county administrator. I think we have about 7 volunteers. If you need the numbers adjusted, we'll be here for you.
Okay,
'Cause
I'll
we
remember
truly-
all your names.
We truly appreciate what is occurring for this county, and that moment when the planes arrive, when the jets come into this town, and the sheriff's office phone starts lighting up, and then our phones start lighting up, and it's actually so energizing that we can't wait for the phone to ring.
Oh, that's good to hear.
Because people are so excited. And then you start seeing the cars lining up and finding strategic spots and traffic stops on US 1 as the planes are arriving over the water. They just stop in their tracks. And that's the moment that you get your thank you for all of your efforts that you're doing. So if we can offset anything in any way, I know you'll call, but you can call upon us. I see a few volunteers. I bet there's some in the audience too.
Oh, well,
Thank you.
thank you.
Are you still going to have the
Last-
volunteer sign-in and parking here at our facility, right?
Yes, we are, and
Okay,
thank you
that-
so much for
and-
that, because our volunteers and both concession and volunteer workers, we want to give them as much appreciation as we can this year, because some of them have returned. This is their 3rd year, and letting us use that building and being, having air conditioning when they're checking in and stuff is just fantastic. And we really, really thank you for
Yeah,
that.
we'd like to coordinate that so as we make sure we've got everything, the air conditioner down, because the doors will be open.
Joe,
and everything.
they're going to use the old, can they park over there at the old administration site?
That's going to, the hub's going to be moved there temporarily because it
Bus hub?
can't be at the airport for those, the hub's going to
Goal
move
line.
back over here.
Right.
This whole facility is going to be only for volunteer parking. We're going to have it, no one else can park here.
They could park on the grass, though.
Yes, they can, we're going to, our whole facility, they can use the other parking lot over there, except the area where the buses are going to pull in, because they're also going to use the buses to, but no, every inch of this whole facility will be for volunteer parking. And we're going to have it manned so that other people can't get in.
Okay.
Yes, one last thing. The Blue Angels' #1 fan, my son Chandler, has his uniform pressed. His shoes are polished. His hat is ready to go. He's got his bars on his collar, and he's practicing his welcome salute for the team when they get here.
How old is he? Was he
6. He's the
okay.
one that's been photographed probably a
Yes.
lot more than me.
Yes, he was the talk of that day.
Yes.
Little cutie, yeah. He was like, oh my gosh, everybody has to shake this little guy's hand. Yeah,
He'll be
he was a
available for
cutie.
autographs. He thinks
Okay.
people want those now.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Thank
you
you.
very We'll now have presentation by Curtis Paulison, First Vice President, and Patricia Geyer, Director of Outreach Programs of the Indian River Counties Veterans Council, on a June 18th golf tournament and other associated programs with that event. Good morning,
And
Mr.
Kim,
Paulison.
thank you very much, Kim, Ms. Prado, Veterans Council. Thank you. Can I use the overhead projector?
You, sir. Certainly can, sir.
I don't know how this works.
You had it right.
One more revolution.
Okay. All right, Commissioners, it's our golf tournament again. We, this year, because of the air show, we were going to have it on June 25th, and luckily, my director of the Veterans Outreach Program told me you can't do it that day. You'll never get someone to show up for this golf tournament. So the golf tournament is for the Veterans Outreach Program. I'm not sure if you all know exactly what the outreach is. It is, basically what it says it is, we reach out to the veterans that are coming back. Unfortunately, the government is kind of slow on helping out some of these guys and girls that are coming back. So we feel as a Veterans Council that we need to step up and help them out. The proceeds from this golf tournament are going to go directly to the outreach program. A portion of it is going to go back into the actual Veterans Council. I haven't determined what portion of that's going to go in there, but we do give back some right to the council also. The tournament is on June 18th. It's over at Sandridge. This year, we're going to be using the lakes course instead of the dunes. Last year, I know every single one of you were there, and we appreciate it. You guys made it a huge success, and hopefully we get to see you again. I know Joe already had volunteered yourself for the air show, but we'd love to have you out there again, every single one of you guys. You guys made a difference out there. You really did. People were talking about it and saying how great it was to see the county commissioners and the support that we got from the county. This year, Bella's been great with us working on this. We made the meal a little bit better, so we had to add a little bit more money to the $50 fee that we had last year. This year, it's $60, which I think is very minimal. We also are offering scholarships, and in fact, Mr. Solari and your beautiful wife Jackie, I want to thank you for the donation that you've already made. It's going to help a bunch of veterans come out there and golf that can't afford it. And it's such a nice thing to see these guys and girls come out and actually interact with each other. Because if not, they sit in their garage, they sit down in their basement. Most of these guys and girls got PTSD, and this is a great way to get them out there. And on that day, also the registration is at 7 o'clock. We're going to have an 8 o'clock shotgun start. We're also going to have music. We're going to have a lady that sings over St. Helens come over and do some patriotic tunes for us prior. And it's filling up really quick. So I'm not sure if Dory got a chance to give you any of these forms at all, but if not, I have some with me. And on the outreach program, I want to go ahead and introduce my director of the outreach program, Pat Geyer, and she's going to get a little bit more in depth on what we're doing in the community with the outreach, with the money and the funds that we make with this tournament.
Thank you. The outreach program from the Veterans Council is fairly new. We started it in probably the last year. Prior to that, you may be aware that we've been providing direct assistance to veterans for living expenses when they have difficulties. And last week, we just surpassed, for the last couple years, giving out $99,000. So we're helping veterans. If they have a problem, we pay the utility company. We don't just give them money, but we help them get back on their feet, and we also help them with budgets and things like that so they can become self-sufficient. Veterans Outreach itself has done things last year. Some of you were at the picnic in October in Gifford, where we had families coming out and brought over 500 veterans and their families to that event. And we've had a few others. But I want to tell you quickly about two new programs. The first one has to do with employment. We held a focus group, and the veterans said to us, the biggest thing right now is we need to get jobs. If we can't get jobs, we can't become functional in this community. So based on the focus group, we just started working with veterans and partnering with CareerSource and other organizations that provide services. To this point, I've talked with 16 veterans on the phone. I've had 10 face-to-face meetings, and we've placed 6 on jobs. We had 4 family members that came to us, and one of them has gotten a job. We also work with employers. We had a focus group with employers to see what they needed to employ veterans. We had 8 employers that had specific jobs open, and some of them had multiple jobs, from lawn maintenance up to an HR professional job. We have 6 local organizations that provide services, like United Against Poverty does the STEP program, CareerSource, et cetera. In January, we have a gentleman who's retiring down here, and he was the president of a very large national career organization. And he is offering pro bono to run workshops in January, and he's going to run 2 different workshops, one for veterans to help them become employable, to help them get ready in addition to other services. This will be in-depth, specifically for veterans. They need to understand the language they want to use in a resume and in an interview so that the employer knows what they're bringing. And they need to understand workplace behaviors. We had one person that got placed. He had been a master sergeant. He worked 3 months for an organization, and he was very good at organizing and at giving direction. But one of their measures of success was engagement, how you work with a team. He never quite got that. He felt everybody he gave a direction to would just now do it and do it perfectly, and that didn't happen. So he self-selected out, and he is looking for something where his skills can be used more effectively. The second thing I want to tell you about is really wonderful. we had an opportunity to get a grant from Grand Harbor for work, and they said they want it to be in Gifford, and they'd like to see us collaborate to do that. So the first thing I did was a little bit of research on your 108-page Gifford Neighborhood Plan of 2014. And after I got through it, I realized there were things that are being done in the community right now at a very large scale, and there were things that maybe weren't quite getting done yet, and I wanted to see where we might fit in there and provide services. One was jobs and vocational training. We need to do more of that, and we need to partner with other organizations. Secondly, we need to hire residents from Gifford and help them get jobs. Another goal was to beautify the community. Now you have revitalization and you have Habitat for Humanity, and they're building places, they're renovating homes, and they're doing major construction work. But another goal was to have well-maintained neighborhoods and help improve self-esteem of individuals and of their neighborhoods. They talked about in the study property values, personal pride, and looking at basically how we can help the community. So I met with the 5 Pillars team in Gifford. I got their input and support. I met with Every Dream Has a Price, Habitat Leadership, Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council, and Sasan Rohani, who helped coordinate this study. Then I met with the American Legion 181 in Gifford. They agreed to partner with us to do a project called Veterans Helping Veterans. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for veteran families who can't afford to do home improvements, might be landscaping, painting, at a level that probably won't even need a permit, and they're unable to do it because of disability or finance. So we'll find those people who need that help. Secondly, we're going to bring on veterans who are in Gifford, who are unemployed or underemployed, and we're going to offer to let them do this work. We'll have contractors pro bono who will supervise it and maybe teach the veterans about painting or the work they're doing, installing some things, and the veterans will do the work, and they'll do it for a stipend. The stipend will be 1/3 of the cost of this effort, whatever it is. If it's $1,000 to paint a house, they'll get $333. They will donate 2/3 of their time to do the work. When the work's done, I will be writing a letter of recommendation for them that identifies the work they did, the quality, the ethic, and they'll be able to use that letter of recommendation as proof that they've done this type of work, they've learned to do it, and might help them in the community, and then I will try and help them get placed in the community. So this program allows veterans to get a little bit of money, pay back to the community, and homeowners to get some work done that they can't do. So we're very fortunate. We did get the grant from Grand Harbor, and we're going to go forward with that. In fact, we're starting right now.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
So other than that, we're not doing much. That's where the money's going to go. It's going to go to the outreach. It's very worthwhile. The one thing that's really great about it is that we're not coming to you to ask for it. We're making it on our own. The community is so generous, as Ms. Prado said earlier. And we plan on, last year we made about $7,000, I believe, profit by the time we were done with the tournament. And this year I think we're going to make a little bit more. And we're looking forward to it. So rest assured, we're out there doing what we can do. Also, I wanted to bring one more thing up to you, gentlemen. You know that we buy the buses. Because Pat takes so much pressure off of me, I'm able to do some things that I normally wouldn't able to do other than veterans, being a vice president. But I've been working with West Palm Beach for the last 3 weeks or so, myself and one of our drivers, and they had an extra vehicle that was laying around over in their parking lot that nobody was using. So we went up to him, spoke with them. I went up to the engineering, spoke with Ed up in West Palm Beach, or down in West Palm Beach, and we have a brand new van that's coming in. It's wheelchair accessible. It's got the lifts already. It's got GPS. It's got 18 miles on it, and they're giving it to us to let us have it. So Indian River County, we're out there. We're doing the best we can.
And how many miles does that have on it?
18 miles.
18 miles.
And it's a beauty.
Great job, Curtis.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I think on behalf of the Board of County Commissioners, I can thank you for all the work that you and the Veterans Council do for all the veterans in our community. We know that we have a lot of veterans. We know that a lot of veterans, both contribute tremendously to our community, but others have problems. And we thank you for all the work that you do to help lift up those who are less fortunate than others, such as yourself.
Well, the county commission's always there supporting this. Mr. Fleischer's always there. You guys are always there, and we appreciate it. And we know what you guys do for us, and we're very, very appreciative. And we sincerely mean that. And if there's any veterans that need anything, they're more than welcome. I'll give my number out right now, 772-538-2484. We're there for them.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to ask, we have this on the website? Will we have this tournament on the website, Joe?
Yes. It's already there. I think Scott's already put it on.
And we're getting response, and we have the applications. I just want to say that it's our distinct pleasure as a board to do everything we can. Veterans ask for nothing, and I want to bring that up. And Pat, thank you so much for inserting your energy. I just want the public to know that veterans don't ask for anything. Veterans very rarely ask for anything. You have to go out there and physically tell them it's available, and then you have to invite them. And I want you to know that I personally appreciate all your work, because we can give you countless stories of veterans who just don't want to ask. They say, give it to where it's needed. And it's needed with the veterans. They are so selfless, and it's our honor to work with whatever we can to make that connection even better so that the veterans do get the services. And I think you're understating your efforts. Thank you.
It's very kind. Thank you, gentlemen. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll see you on the 18th.
Moving on to information items. Anybody want to pull anything?
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to highlight that we have a retirement for Brian Williamson with 30 years of service to the Emergency Services Fire Rescue. And just a little side note, Brian is also a fairly good fishing guide, and even better, he works at a Riverside Cafe. And as Commissioner Davis knows, a long day of fishing on the water is thirsty work. So you can just come right back there to Riverside Cafe, and it's all there for you. So anyway, thank you, Brian, for your 30 years of service.
And thank you for Commissioner O'Brien for bringing that up. Moving on to the consent agenda. Anybody want to pull any items from the consent agenda? I'll ask if anybody from the public wishes anything from the consent agenda to be pulled so they can discuss it. 8C, very good. Anything else? Gentlemen,
Approval as amended.
Second.
we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Johnson, 8C, resolution canceling taxes on property purchased by Indian River County for surface water storage and treatment.
Bob Johnson, Carlin Subdivision. I have a question on how the process for doing canceling taxes in this particular case. Why the taxes weren't rolled into the $1 million+ that the county paid for the purchase to begin with.
Bill,
It's moving forward.
I mean, it's going, yeah. Go
Bill
ahead, Bill.
DeBrawl on behalf of the County Attorney's Office. The taxes were paid at the time of closing, the taxes that were due. As a government entity, the county cannot pay taxes in a real estate transaction. This resolution simply cancels the taxes, takes the property off the tax roll, so it's formally recognized as government-owned property.
There were over $5,000 to $6,000 exempt. Where is that a show up in a line item in the budget? That the,
No, what happened is those were taken care of by the seller to clear title.
Did the
And
seller
they-
pay for the taxes before he closed the deal?
Yes,
Yes.
whatever taxes were due, and
Prorated.
they were prorated at the time of the closing.
And who is the seller specifically? Was it a local?
The seller was I believe, a financial institution out of Miami.
That's the LLC. We don't know who's behind that.
It was a foreclosure, so it probably was some affiliate of a bank or a company that bought the property from the bank or has an agreement with the bank to dispose of foreclosed properties, especially larger ones like
When you
these.
look at the attachment on the number of parcels,
There were no parcels here. This was just there were two parcels that were purchased here. It had not been yet subdivided and platted.
isn't the attachment have like 7 or 9 parcels on the attachment, on the backup material?
I had thought there were just a couple of them that were involved in this one.
Well, Bob, there are 5 different parcels. I believe 4 of them were contained within one of those properties, and the other one described was contained within the second parcel as described by Mr. DeBrawl.
And this all adds up to 83 acres or something on that same property? Is that what you're?
Correct.
But there's no way when you look at this to annotate whether it's 83 acres or not. It's just
Well, that's because they.
legal terminology.
Yeah, it's meets and bounds legal description, Bob.
Right.
Which is more accurate than an 83 acres.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Chair will entertain a
Move
motion.
approval of item C.
Second.
We have a motion to approve item C from Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Zork. Any other discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
I don't think we did the agenda the consent agenda as a whole, though.
We did.
Oh, we did?
Yep.
It happened so quickly, Counselor.
We'll move on to public items. Ordinance concerning medical marijuana.
No?
I wrote down in my notes, anyone else from, because I heard nothing from the commission. I heard then Bob Johnson wanted to get up and speak on 8C.
I made motion.
Okay.
Second
Yes,
it.
it was made by Commissioner Fleischer, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien.
Great, thank you. Just want to clarify that.
Move on to public items, public hearings, ordinance concerning medical marijuana.
Thank you very much to the chair. Amendment 2 concerning medical marijuana will be back on the ballot in November this year. It is very similar to the Amendment 2 that was considered by the voters in 2014. And that Amendment 2 had actually failed to meet the threshold requirements for becoming an amendment to the Florida Constitution. In 2014, prior to that amendment being considered, this board had adopted a regulatory ordinance concerning medical marijuana treatment facilities. On April 5th, 2016, this board had authorized the county attorney's office to revisit the code changes that were adopted by the board back in 2014. Just to clarify for the audience, after the 2014 regulatory ordinance changes were incorporated into the code, the board, at the request of the county attorney's office, had repealed those as the medical marijuana ordinance had not, or medical marijuana amendment had not been adopted by the voters. Like the regulatory ordinance adopted by the board in 2014, this proposed ordinance will incorporate the regulation of medical marijuana treatment centers into the pain management clinic ordinance, which applies countywide, including the municipalities. The ordinance will include local permitting process incorporated into the pain management clinic ordinance, which will then apply also to medical marijuana treatment centers. There will be a companion zoning ordinance, which will require a public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission. Additionally, 2 public hearings before the Board of County Commissioners. I've coordinated with Community Development Department staff on that, and we anticipate having the zoning item come before the Planning and Zoning Commission in August, with hearings before the board in September and October. Thus, the zoning ordinance will be in place if adopted by the board prior to the November election. Like we did in 2014, the county attorney circulated the drafts to the various cities and also to the sheriff's office, again, because this will be applying countywide, including the municipalities. We have received no objections to the draft ordinance. The county attorney simply recommends that we open up the public hearing that we have today, take any public comment from the audience, and then close the public hearing and vote to adopt the ordinance as presented. With that, I turn it back over to the chair and the board for any questions for me before the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Reingold. Any questions of Mr. Reingold?
Not at the moment, but
If there are none at the present time, I will open the public hearing. Would anybody from the public wish to speak on this item? Anybody from the public wish to speak on the ordinance concerning medical marijuana? There being no one wishing to speak, I'll close the public hearing. Gentlemen,
Move approval.
Oh, second.
we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, seconded by Commissioner O'Brien. Any other discussion?
I have an item, but it's probably not relevant to the motion that I'd like to bring up relating to medical marijuana after we do this.
Why don't we go ahead with the motion, then we'll let you bring it up.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Commissioner Zorn.
Thank you to the board for your approval of this, staff.
Yes. This question directed to the county attorney. Last week I heard Mr. Morgan of Morgan & Morgan on a talk show talking about he's a very big proponent, a big underwriter on this that they've fixed. I know in the prior version, there were, I would say, a number of potential HR issues that if a employee was granted or deemed to be needing medical marijuana for treatment in the broad sense, where it was not life-threatening, it was not as, it was very broad in the definition of, you could have a, basically you could have a stub toe and say, I need treatment for that, and my treatment choice is marijuana. Is there anything, I know in the rulemaking game you have to look at something before it goes into effect. You can't do things retroactively after it's approved. But would you mind taking some time over the next week or two looking at, is there any potential HR policies, directives, things that we might need to change based on the current language of the ballot measure, to see if there's anything that we should be concerned about and suggest any changes to us. I know before there was a lot of things that I think would drive a lot of business to his type of firm, because somebody could say they were discriminated against because we wouldn't allow them to come to work under the influence of their medical marijuana. That's their prescription. To me, a prescription is you go to the doctor, they write it, you go to Walgreens, CVS, or Walmart, you get your prescription filled. I get that type of medicine. This is a whole nother slippery slope the way I see it. And hearing him sound very comfortable about it, that all those liability issues have been taken off the table, gives me no confidence level that, I think he's just rewarded them to make them sound more warm and fuzzy, but the potential HR liabilities that claims people could make down the road were concerning, that the person doing the interview brought up, and he just really talked around those. So if you could look at that angle and maybe give us any suggestions back, that would be great.
I'd be happy to research the HR issues and those issues and bring them back to the board for
Okay.
Thank you,
information.
Commissioner Zork. We'll move on to public discussion items. Request to speak from Susan Meal regarding AAF FEC and the nuclear power plant. Phyllis Fry has stepped in to speak on Ms. Meal's behalf. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning, Commissioners. For the public record, Phyllis Fry at 275 Date Pond Road in Vero Beach. As you said, Ms. Meal is unable to attend today, so I've prepared a presentation at her request, and I wanted to let you know that Ms. Meal has conducted a considerable amount of discussion and research on the nuclear power with nuclear power consultants regarding questionable safety and regulatory procedures associated with a proposal for rail transport of explosive hazmat in close proximity to the nuclear power plant in St. Lucie County. These safety concerns are heightened by the planned addition of 32 high-speed passenger trains daily, sharing the tracks with FEC freight trains carrying hazmat, including the addition of liquid natural gas. It's important to note that Indian River County is located within the 50-mile sphere of influence should a catastrophic event, occur, as shown on these diagrams. I hope that they are somewhat clear. You can see Vero Beach here, and you can see that the 50-mile range extends up to Palm Bay in the sphere of influence. Nuclear power experts in Washington, D.C. are questioning whether the St. Lucie facility, built in 1970, has current RNC regulations and procedures in place for external negative impacts on the nuclear power plant, such as explosive hazmat, or chlorine gas spills, and the volatility of far-reaching liquid natural gas plumes. While the Price-Anderson Act requires the insurability of nuclear power plants, the inclusion of increased freight and passenger speed trains requires closer scrutiny with regard to the safety of the general populace and our environment. Has All Aboard Florida, for example, made provisions for liability issues associated with their operations, including derailments or collisions with hazmat trains, and the explosive effect on the nuclear facility? St. Lucie Village in St. Lucie County, with a population of 200,000 residents, is located within a 10-mile radius of the nuclear power plant. Due to heightened concerns by its citizens, Mayor Bill Thies sent a letter to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, FEMA, the U.S. DOT, and to the related state agencies, FDOT, and the Florida Division of Emergency Management, citing the significant increase in the transport of hazmat and 32 passenger trains located less than 2 miles from the nuclear power plant. 5,000 residents comprising the Hutchison Island Homeowners Association support a resolution demanding that FEC not be allowed to transport LNG anywhere near the nuclear facility. As you will note in the packet provided, Mayor Bill Thies questions whether the control center at the nuclear facility has conducted a current analysis of external hazards such as hazmat breaches at grade crossings and intersections involving the explosion of volatile materials. Does the plant have emergency procedures in place for the plumes of chlorine gas or LNG fires and clouds that would impact the nuclear facility? And by the way, if you don't have that packet, I will see to it that you do get it today, the letter from Bill Thies. Analysis of external hazards to control center operations at the nuclear facility must provide documented safety regulations for evacuations and emergency procedures for 5, 10, and 50-mile radiuses. Specifically, what notifications have been sent to FEMA and Homeland Security, what emergency response procedures have been upgraded for the new external conditions that will impact the safety of the nuclear facility and our citizens. Has the FP&L plant designed, documented, and simulated an emergency and evacuation plan that predicts freight or passenger trains blocking intersections at the time of a nuclear accident or breaches to the nuclear facility due to rail accidents? Does All Aboard Florida have an emergency evacuation procedures in place for such events? Have preparations been made for the dangers of an accident or derailment below the high-powered electrical lines that pass directly over the tracks that would further increase the dangers of a chemical explosion or release of a toxic flammable gas? It's important to note that in St. Lucie Village, 200,000 people live within the 10-mile emergency planning zone, as this diagram indicates. It's exactly 1.97 miles. The St. Lucie Nuclear Power Plant is located 1.97 miles from the rail tracks, and we would like to know what, if any, additional safety measures have been in place to protect the citizens. In this diagram, as you see, vulnerability analysis provided by the EPA software illustrates the scope and reach of catastrophic hazmat accidents and chemical releases. In Martin County, for example, studies show that in the event of a chlorine gas railcar accident at Southeast Cove Road and Southeast Dixie Highway, the red zone, measured at greater than 5 miles, would impact 5,317 people, or 3,249 homes. The orange zone at a distance greater than 6 miles would impact 5,602 people and 3,061 homes. Martin County Fire Rescue Department Division Chief of Operations Daniel Wouters states that Martin County's fire rescue response options are limited and could easily be overwhelmed and would require comprehensive management plans to mitigate such safety risks. We ask, what plans does our Indian River County Emergency Response Team have in place for responding to such catastrophes? In closing, in view of these unanswered questions, today we ask our commissioners of Indian River County to join St. Lucie and elected officials and support St. Lucie's Village's lead in writing to federal and state agencies expressing concern for the safety of our residents, with follow-ups demanding the necessary compliances and resources for safety mitigation. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Joe, would it be possible to go ahead and at least write to some of the federal agencies and ask to make sure that they're complying with everything? And has our emergency services department done any just basic looking into the impact of either a nuclear problem or, say, a liquefied natural gas problem?
Due to us being a host county for the FP&L plant, we go through training constant every year, all year long, regarding if there was a nuclear disaster. So we also have the equipment. We have hazmat equipment, uniforms. We go through training constant, which is required under being a host county, and we also get reimbursed for that from FP&L. But we go through training in case there was a nuclear incident at the plant, and we have for forever, just about since the plant was put in place. And it's actually our people are trained in case there is an incident. We have hazmat uniforms, and it's helped us when a lot of these viruses come out because it's a containment thing. So we do go through training because of it, and it is required.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner
were you
Sorg.
thinking more on the lines of the liquefied natural gas? I don't know if since it's not transported on the rails, I don't know, do we get notice that they're going to start transporting that, and then we come up with a plan to support?
That's a good question. I mean, from what people have been saying and from what I've read, it seems like it's clear that Fortress is first engaged in, or soon to be engaged in, the production of liquefied natural gas, and second, that they'll be using the FECI tracks to transport it. So can we at least ask Joe if you can keep that in mind and make sure our emergency services is aware first that may occur, and try to stay on top of it in case it does, for whatever additional training they may need at that time.
And keep in mind, we have natural gas lines that run through the county, so we do have incidents, and we are
Yeah, but
also
there's a
trained.
huge difference between a natural gas line and a
Yes.
natural gas being transported on
Okay.
on rail, as some communities up north have learned to their chagrin. Thank you. Moving on, we'll go to public notice items. Notice of scheduled public hearing. Mr. Reingold.
To the chair, I didn't know how you wanted to handle this. I see somebody wants to speak on behalf of that item.
That's fine if he wants to come up.
And to the chair, I'll work with the county administrator to draft up a letter in support of, what St. Lucie Village has been doing.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Name and address to the record, please.
Keith Kite, 1045 Winding River Road, Vero Beach, Florida. Thank you for a few moments of your time, honorable commissioners. And Mr. Solari, thank you for inquiring on the safety of our citizens along the rail. I just felt that on, LNG, that we have I think the appropriate regulatory agencies in place through the NRA, the National Nuclear Regulatory Association, the Federal Railroad Safety Administration, the DEP, and a whole another host of agencies that can support you in ensuring the safety of the rail line through our county. Also, I understand through FEC that you can obtain a daily manifest of all goods on the train, not just LNG. So I think that if you reach out to FEC, or I can certainly provide you, Joe, the appropriate contact to get all goods passing through our county on a daily basis, so that your appropriate hazmat teams could be prepared in the event of a catastrophe. Lastly, I'd like to point out that, protecting our life safety and getting our concerns addressed, I do not believe that fear-mongering in this chamber is the appropriate place to have that occur. I think that you're well served by getting with your public works departments, your hazmat teams, and everyone else that's involved in the safety of our citizens to ensure that we have the appropriate facilities in place to handle these types of conditions. And lastly, as maybe smoke and mirrors or whatever it may be, we now have 100% plans from All Aboard Florida, as I understand it, in your Public Works Department. And I think that now would be the appropriate time and format to ensure the safety of sealed corridors, improved track infrastructure, and quiet zones to secure a safe rail line through our county. The All Aboard Florida Safety Rail Infrastructure improvements certainly offer nothing but an improved mechanism had we not had these opportunities in public forums the last couple of years to have a safer infrastructure passing through our county than we would have without it. in an old antiquated structure. So just keep in mind that if we now have these 100% plans, let's take those through your Public Works Department to ensure that those various agencies that I mentioned earlier provide you the safety level and concerns that you would like to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have received so-called 100% plans. Staff, Public Works is reviewing. In fact, that's what Chris Moore is spending 100% of his time right now to review it, along with the traffic engineer. They're going into extreme detail to review it and have comments on those plans. We've already got that in place. So the whole we're putting a lot of resources to review it. Plus, we have the consultant. We have a consultant to review the plans too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, on that, would it be appropriate now that after many promises to have, we now have them, and the community has been asking when would we have them, what do they look like, to have either Public Works hold a little maybe open viewing opportunity over at the Building B in the 105 room for people to see what that looks like, you know, just, I know there's a comment window, so showing it to the people before the comment window closes would be, I think, a good idea, and just maybe put a 2-hour window and put Chris and our traffic consultant and just put the plans in there if anybody from the public wants to see them. I think they're too bulky to put on the website, Scott. I mean, they're pretty, you'd have to put a link that would get you to them to view them. That may be still a possibility, but.
Dylan, how long is the public comment period? Do you know?
Well, I don't have a specific public comment period on the 90% or the 100% plans. What we do have comment periods on is we have them on the Army Corps of Engineers permit application. That comment period closes on Wednesday. Fortunately, the Army Corps of Engineers in their most recent letter on that issue actually stated they will accept comments afterward, and I can tell you we will be incorporating some of the comments or things that we learned by reviewing the 100% plans into our Army Corps of Engineers comment at the end of the day, whether it's by tomorrow or at some point that we find something significant to present to the Corps.
Okay. Why don't we, if we could then ask Chris Moore if he thinks there'd be value in having a couple hours where the public's available to take a look at the plans.
Well,
Let me, Chris is actually in his office reviewing right now. Let me get him on the phone and have him come down.
That'd be great.
Okay.
I'll pick that up. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just earlier, the manifest was, I guess Joe's on the phone. The manifest was mentioned. I wanted to confirm that we are currently getting the material manifest for emergency services. Joe? Pardon? Are we currently getting the materials manifest that are traveling through this county?
I'm not. I'm pretty sure we are not. But we're not getting them presently, but you know, we can ask.
Should probably sign up and get the daily.
Yes. Yeah, and that would probably go through. I'd probably have my emergency services looking at those.
I think that would be prudent. No.
Okay. Yes, I've got a note down here.
Thank you, sir.
And Joe, did you get Chris?
Chris is on his way right
Why
now.
don't we let Dylan, if you could, read the public notice item, and when Chris comes in after that, we'll.
I'd be delighted.
Thank you.
To the board, the public, and those watching at home, we have one public notice item. This is a notice of a scheduled public hearing for May 24, 2016. This is a county-initiated request to amend, update the text of several elements of the county's comprehensive plan, including the future land use element, the recreation and open space element, the transportation element, the economic development element, and the solid waste sub-element. This will be legislative in nature, and again, this will be a public hearing that will be held on May 24, 2016. And with that, I turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mora. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The
and
question
Commissioners. Chris
for you-
Mora, Public
for
Works Director. I heard the question
Okay.
about the all aboard for it 100% plans. We're in the middle of reviewing. They're about 1.5 to 2 inches thick, and they've got various sections for the railway crossing improvements, the roadway improvements, the traffic signalization, and the railway signalization. We could make them available through a link on our website, But they are technical engineering plans. Maybe the best thing to do would be to, as you mentioned, set aside a 2-hour window over in Building B where the public could come in, and I'd make myself available and staff available to explain the nature of the plans and what they actually depict.
And when do you think you'd be ready to, or your department would be ready to do something like that?
We could be ready with, within a few days to do that. Right now, we're just putting together all of the comments. We're going through them sheet by sheet. But if you want to wait until we have all of our comments put together, then it would take us probably about a week.
Okay,
But we could have, if it's just a 2-hour window, we could lay the plans out on a big table in the conference room in Building B and explain them to the public, basically.
And maybe you can plan for something like that towards the end of next week, and that way we'd be able to announce at next
Right.
week's meeting the time and place of that.
Yeah, that's doable.
Oh, great.
Two questions. Kind of, Chris, in your initial review, I know I'd met with you and staff, and we looked at all the county crossings for our 5-year, 10-year plans, what we might be doing, sidewalks or turn lanes. I know you're just kind of getting into it, but does it look like so far that it looks like they designed towards where we said we're going to in the future on some of the crossings, or does it look like you've got some issues right off the bat?
We haven't gotten that far into the construction plan. Right now, we're looking at the signalization and preemption type plans to make sure that the electronics mesh with the signalization that we have out there, basically because those are the plans on top. But
Right.
we'll be getting to the actual roadway construction and looking at the proposed medians and exit gates. They do propose a lot of exit gates, so they are adding a lot of safety features to the crossings. But then we did ask for sidewalk connections and things like that for roads that we plan to widen and provide sidewalks in the near future. So when we get to the construction plans, we'll be able to see that.
And then is the city doing a similar exercise like we're doing, and should we coordinate anything with them, even though it's crossing responsibility falls? I know the one that we had met with city staff on the Aviation Boulevard and US 1 interchange, or not interchange, but crossing area, that it's a city crossing, but it could be a county project that's
Well,
widening
as
that.
soon as I received the link from All Aboard Florida to the plans, I forwarded that to Monty Falls over at City of Vero Beach and Frank Watanabe at City of Sebastian. So I assume that they're going through the same exercise. Now, we're looking at all of the crossings countywide, including the private one at Hawks Nest, the DOT crossings at State Road 60, and the city crossings, because many of the city crossings, we maintain the traffic signals.
Right.
So we've got to make, because that's our equipment there, we've got to make sure that even though they're city crossings, that they work with our signalization equipment and controllers. So we're looking at all of them countywide, and I assume that since I provided that link to the cities, that they're also looking at the ones that are physically located in their city boundaries. If those are going to be widened in any way, or if construction's taking place outside of the railroad right-of-way, then the thinking is that they're going to have, the AAF is going to have to go to the cities to get permits to do work on city streets, just like we're going to require them to get a county permit to do work on county rights-of-way.
Okay, and last question, this kind of goes to Dylan and Chris. Recently with the Florida Power and Light plant in Okeechobee, we, in the commenting period on some of their permits, we were able to say and ask for from FP&L the $200,000 in training, the $90,000 in initial response allocation dollars. Is there any permitting that they're going through that gives us an opportunity to ask for any of these things? I think really a train issue is a regional response issue, because you can't afford to have that type of heavy rescue equipment in every community along the tracks. That would be cost prohibitive, but there must be some, logical thinking where you have more passenger and freight rail systems, that there's some type of coordinated effort, or maybe you think that there is, but there isn't one. And I don't know if the railroads have their own response heavy rescue people and they work with locals, or but if there's any of those opportunities where we can hold up a permit and bring up a concern like we did with Florida Power and Light, then those concerns eventually got addressed after a couple of years.
You know, we've got, Commissioner Zork, right now, we've got a pretty narrow focus on looking at
Sure.
this plan. Just construction-related issues, technical issues, safety issues. That's kind of a larger
A bigger
issue,
picture,
maybe
right.
maybe more of a John King question.
Yeah, and Commissioner, thing, if you recall, I mean, that's part of what you're talking about in terms of the FPL energy side. That's a, statutorily based process, defined, codified, and the like. I think at this point, what we're doing is exactly what Chris described. We're reviewing these plans, identifying issues. We will most likely will be providing comments to FRA and All Aboard Florida and try to sort through those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Zork, you done. Mr. Powell?
Afternoon, Commissioners. Gentlemen, I'd like to, unless Chris can stay, I'd appreciate him answering this, actually. Doing all this and going through these analyses and what have you, has it ever been analyzed and we ever looked into actually how this is going to affect our level of service on the roads, how it's going to affect me being able to achieve concurrency as a developer or a businessman, and how it's going to affect our impact fees in the future? Reaching out, having 32 trains a day go across our streets, got to lower our level of service. That's going to make it harder for me to achieve concurrency, cost me more money as a developer to put in a site. I don't think I should be responsible for that. I think that the railroad should be responsible for that, and it's not going to lower our impact fees because we don't have any stops here, like in South Florida. So is there any analyses being done on that?
We did, actually. We hired an outside traffic engineer to look at how the additional 32 trains, 32 stoppages at each of the crossings in the county, it's 32 additional trains, 32 crossings, how that would impact traffic in the county. And as we suspected, there's going to be more congestion. Now, how that will relate to level of service, we don't know yet. We're looking at that. I guess if there is a good thing about this, that the train crossings are very quick. They're about 20 to 25 seconds from when the gate goes down to when the gate goes back up. So, but as you well know, when even 25 seconds during a peak hour can back up and queue up traffic pretty significantly. So we're looking at that. We've hired someone to take a look at it. We know there's going to be an impact, but we're just trying to define numerically what that impact would be.
And I understand that, and I'm not asking for an answer of that type right now. What I'm asking for is that we know it can't be a positive impact. We know it's going to be a negative impact. We know it's going to cost somebody more money. Who's going to be responsible for that? It should be the railroad, not me as a developer if I can't achieve my level of service and I can't achieve my concurrency. So anywhere in there, are we negotiating who's going to be responsible for that?
Right, and I think the railroad's position has been their position all along that years ago when they operated more freight trains, longer trains, they undoubtedly backed up traffic more during those times. When they cut back and didn't have the longer trains or as many trains, then we got some relief from that. But their position pretty much is that they get to use their right-of-way to their advantage. And
Joe, hold on one second. Maybe, or Mr. Chairman, if I might, maybe we could look at making a policy decision that effects from reduced level of service because of the train should not be ever factored into the cost equation of our impact fee ordinance because we're not causing the reduction in level of service.
That's the question I'm asking.
I think someone's going to have to pay, so if you don't have it in the equation, it's going to come out of taxes.
Well, you'd have to say you explore all remedies to get it from the person causing the.
Yeah, and why couldn't we have a policy that if they're responsible for that lowered level of service, if they're responsible for the extra impact fee coming in, why wouldn't they take responsibility for that? They're trying to take responsibility for putting in the crossings, which is a minimal amount. But, we got to think about service in the future, and more importantly, if we can't achieve level of service, if we can't achieve concurrency, it could stop a project from going forward. Somebody has to take responsibility for that, not the county, and not me if I didn't, create the problem. I think they should take responsibility, so I'd like to see something in writing that they're going to step up to the plate and be responsible for any level of service that they may lower on our roads.
And Commission, if you would like, I mean, there are preemption arguments that the railroad will throw out all day long. I'd be happy to research that and figure out if impact fees is within the range of that preemption issue. But I will tell you, there is a good chance that trying to charge such an item, the railroad would say is preempted under federal law.
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, if we're not allowed to do anything regarding safety, such as speed limits, even though we're looking into some aspects of it, it's highly unlikely that we're going to be able to charge them something like impact fees. But we can ask the county attorney to look into it, but I don't think it's an area that's going to be very fruitful for us as we go forward.
I understand. I'm just thinking that was something we need to look at in the future, that if we're borderline of being at the level of service where I can achieve concurrency on a project.
That's another specific thing for another day, I believe. I think that the board will understand that when the time comes, but I don't think it's something we're going to be able to address today.
No, I agree. I just would like that to be looked into somewhere along the line. I'd like to make that a point. Thank you.
I think we're finally finished with this matter, and we'll move on to county administrator matters, health insurance subsidy for retirees. Mr. County Administrator.
Yes, when we made the change a few years ago to close the employees' health insurance subsidy, there was an unintended consequence that occurred that has been brought to my attention. If an employee has a dependent on their plan and they reach Medicaid age, we require the employee to get on Medicaid supplement plan. Well, right now it says Blue Cross Advantage plan. There's been two problems with that. First of all, the Blue Cross Advantage plan has a very limited network, so no one's taking it. The second one is if the employee has a younger spouse, they lose the subsidy, and that was an unintended consequence at the time. And it was brought to my attention. We didn't think of that scenario. So what I'm basically asking today is maybe a change where we allow them still to get the subsidy for the spouse in that case, and also that we still require them to get on a Medicare supplement plan when they reach that age, but I think we don't want to call it the Blue Cross Advantage plan because it's not working. So I think that we require them to get on a Medicaid supplement plan, but not name the plan, which doesn't have a good network. Those are my two things that I'd like to see change, allow the subsidy. Now, I will say this probably is going to increase the cost of in the actuarial, but I can't quantify it. I don't think it'll be that great, but I can't quantify it. I'm not an actuarial, and we have to have one done every year. So, but it's just something that was an unintended negative consequence that we didn't think that scenario through. So I'd like to have those changes if the board is willing.
I have a question for Dylan first. Dylan, evidently I'm soon to be part of Medicare. And as my wife likes to point out, she's much younger than I am. So is this something where if I vote for it, there'd be a conflict?
Just don't have your next birthday.
Off the top, I'd have to check what the class of individuals is to determine. Usually in the type of issue like this is you would look at a particular commissioner, your interest relative to a class, and if you're a certain small percentage of that class, then you would not have a personal conflict in that item. But I don't know how many folks out there.
I don't think you could look at it because there's a lot of things we vote on that are benefits. The commission's always voted and they receive those benefits.
If
like health
there's a
insurance.
large class of people, then it's not a conflict.
No, okay.
Yeah.
So, and you're not retired.
I missed your opinion. Am I safe to vote on this one, or?
Joe, is there a large class of individuals who would be affected by this?
Are we fixing to vote on this?
Yeah.
Well, I think we are.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a small percentage that this board consists of relative to all the other folks involved, which would be folks to be named going to the future, you're just a small group of a larger class of individuals, there would no conflict.
I'm good with that. I just wanted to make sure I brought it up and had a little discussion on it. Commissioner
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Zork, then I'll get to.
Does this do anything to folks that were inadvertently affected by this, where they reached the age, signed up, and then found after the fact that the spousal coverage went away? Do they have an opportunity to come back into the?
Yeah, we'd probably allow them to come back in because what has happened? Well, they can stay in, but they didn't get the subsidy. So they could stay in, but they lose their subsidy. It really affects a road and bridge worker out there that, that didn't make much money, is not getting a big pension, and can't afford to do it. It affects your lower-end worker a lot more than your higher-end worker in this case.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Fletcher.
Well, unfortunately for your situation, at least 3 of us will be able to go forward for many years on the voting process. So we'll take that under consideration.
And I think to answer, I think it does affect, I think every one of your wives are a lot younger than you. So I think it
shows.
As affecting you.
Right? No.
You call him the old one.
Only 2? Mine's 10. Yeah.
Not you.
Well, you said 3
It
of us.
impacts all
I
employees.
said at least 3. At least 3.
Well,
You want to reveal your numbers? No.
Any other questions of the county administrator? Gentlemen?
Staff recommendation.
We have a
Second.
motion from Commissioner O'Brien and a second from Commissioner Fletcher to move staff recommendation. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. I think this is a great time for about a 10-minute break. Reconvene the meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. We move to Office of Management and Budget, quarterly budget report. Mr. Brown, one of your last ones.
Yes, this should be my last one. We'll let Mr. Smikowski take over from here. For the record, Jason Brown, old County Budget Director. So we'll, oh, here I am, all in the wrong spot. So we have our second quarterly budget report. I'd like to start out as we do with the dashboard here. Shows our revenues kind of as a picture of how we're doing, how the economy's looking. So our 0.5% sales tax, optional sales tax are up about 4 or 5%. Tourist tax continues to outperform, up 12.2%. March was up only 8.2%, but still year to date we're up 12% on there. Our traffic impact fees continue to exceed last year's. Gas tax, despite a down March, we were down about 3.5% in the month of March for gas tax.
Jason, is this is quarterly?
This is year to date. These are year to date.
Okay, so it's not okay.
Yeah,
This is halfway through the year then.
Yes,
for second quarter. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, these are 6-month results. Our fiscal year begins October 1st, so this is through March 31st. Franchise fees are down slightly. That's due to a mixture of several factors. Our solid waste franchise fees down significantly due to decreased rates based on the latest franchise agreement. So our solid waste franchise fees down about 22%. Slight decrease in natural gas. The electric and water are up 1% and 2% respectively. So on to the general fund. If you look here, through 6 months of the year, we've collected 72.4% of our budgeted revenues. As you know, we collect the bulk of our property taxes come in December, January, February timeframe. They are due by the end of March, so we have received most of those by this time of the year. So in these taxing funds, we expect to be over 50%. About 69% of the general fund revenues are property taxes, so that's why we're at 72%. Our expenses are 51.4%, a little bit over 50%. However, I will mention that the tax collector at the end of the year always turns in those excess fees, so they're over the budget amount by about $2.5 million right now. They'll send those fees back. If you deduct that anomaly out, we're at 48.4% of the budgeted expenditures halfway through the year, so that's good. We like to be under that 50%, so things are moving along. We are up about $4 million overall in revenues from last year. The bulk of that is the ad valorem taxes. We're up about $3 million, and that is due to the tax roll growth. The tax roll grew at about 7.1% last year. We did not increase the millage rate, so that is all tax growth. We have collected 93.3% of the ad valorem levy through March. That's just a little bit above last year, 93.2%. We're on pace. We'll collect about 95 or 96% of the levy based on this rate. So expenditures were up about $2 million from last year. The largest item there is constitutional officers. That's about 1.4 million of that. We have some other expenses, departmental expenses, increase in children's services funding have accounted for that as well. Back to the revenues, we also had some grants for SRA that were late getting last year that we got early this year, so those are bumping up our revenues. So they were a detriment last fiscal year because of about 600,000. We're about 600,000 ahead because of that this current year. On to the MSTU fund. You can see here we've collected 57% of the revenues. While the MSTU fund is a taxing fund, it's much less reliant on the property taxes than the general fund and the emergency services district. So only about 35% of the budget comes from ad valorem taxes here. So you see we're only at 57% compared to 72% on the revenues. So we are running a little bit ahead of last year. That's largely due to the ad valorem tax roll increase. Once again, we did not increase taxes from the previous year, but the tax roll growth of about 7.4% here increased our revenues by about 600,000. We're also up about 200,000 on half-cent sales tax here. Franchise fees, we are a little bit behind on due to the lag time because we've received about 5 months worth of the ad valorem or of the franchise fees through 6 months. Expenses were 48.1%, right where we like to be. A little bit under because we've got some seasonal operations. For instance, our county pools, our recreation department, they spend more in the summer months when people are going to the pools. We also have more revenues at those times as well to offset that. So we're looking pretty good there overall. So there's some of the rundown. Half-cent sales tax, that's 173, and then the revenue sharing is 93,000, and franchise fees down slightly. Our pool revenue is up from last year largely because in late 2014 we had to drain the big Olympic pool to redo that, so it was closed for about a month. So our numbers this year comparisons look very favorable. On the expenditure side, our transfers out are up about 200,000. That's to support the law enforcement budget as well as increased transfers to the transportation fund to improve that fund as we had shortfalls there in the past. So we're getting back and we're back on that break-even year where we're not this year we're not using any fund balance where we had to use a little bit in previous years. So on to transportation fund, we're up on revenues there, down a little bit on expenditures. The reason for that is those transfers from the general fund and MSTU to ensure that the transportation fund stays on good footing. Also last year, you'll recall, we had a one-time catch-up of capital, the heavy yellow equipment, capital, particularly road and bridge, and engineering and some of those other departments in public works. Last year at this time, it was about $1 million in catch-up, in a kind of a one-time catch-up, and so that was. We're about 550,000 better than last year because we don't have that expense this year. Emergency services, you'll see here that we're, like the general fund, about 72% of revenue, and that's due to the dependence on the ad valorem tax roll. About 70% of the emergency services district budget comes from ad valorem taxes. So you see here we're up about $4.8 million. We had a tax roll growth of about 7%. We also raised the millage rate about 13% here so that we could pay for the operating costs of Station 13.
Before you leave that, Jason.
Yes.
Just real quick. Okay, so now let's just assume a similar jump in the assessed values and opening up Station, was it 14? Is that going to open next fiscal year?
Yes, per board's previous direction, we're moving forward on opening the Station 14 or 15, I can't remember which we call it, at the
Station
North County Pool, essentially, we'll be coming back to the board.
What about the one where the JCs is?
What we're planning on is leapfrogging that one because it's ready to do now. There's been some discussion on the location on 14.
Okay.
So we're looking at that one at 510 and 512.
Okay.
Opening that, moving the modular from Station 1 up there. We've been in communication with the state. We've gotten the general okay. We'll be bringing something back to the board. We'll need a lease amendment.
Okay.
And then to get the ball rolling on that, I think we should move forward.
We're going to staff that.
Purchasing apparatus and all that stuff so that we get that on its way here, so that it's in time to add that staffing there.
Right, and we'll just put a box there. We won't need or we're going to put just a ALS fire.
I think for now we're looking at an ALS engine.
Okay.
It gets the service started.
Yeah.
We've also got limited space in the modular
Right. Perfect. Yeah, great.
So we are seeing an increase in the revenue because of the two effects, the increased tax roll and the increased millage rate, and that was to support addition of Station 13 as well as some of the capital catch-up and the construction that we've had going on this year. Also, our ALS revenue is up very strong. Some of that is a catch-up from prior years that had not been paid. So it's not quite as good as that ongoing, but we're definitely seeing strong ALS revenue, and that's a reflection of the increased call.
Next fiscal year will be the final year of the catch-up, the 5-year plan that we had for catch-up from the Great Recession. Is that correct?
Once we get through next year, we should be through that main catch-up plan.
Okay.
And when we come with the budget next year, we'll have all that capital that's in there as part of the 5-year plan.
All right.
So salary and benefits up to $1.3 million, capital expenses up $2.4 million. There was a little bit of carry-on from Station 13. We've also had the expense with the modulars at Stations 1 and Station 7, and then the renovation at Station 1 is about $1.3 million. So those are some non-recurring expenses that are impacting our expenditures this year.
While we're still talking about that, Joe, if we could, I got a complaint the other day about the old JC site, about it needing mowing. And if we're going to put that off for a year, get it mowed, and maybe have somebody go down and knock those mounds of dirt over so that we can maintain it relatively easy for a year. Thank you.
There we go. We lost one out there. Just want to talk about our enterprise funds a little bit. Golf course is down just a little bit from last year. Had a good year last year. Expect to have continued good operations out there. Rounds are down a little bit from last year, largely due to we had I think the rainiest winter I can remember. So that put a damper on some of those rounds that we would have gotten January, February, March. You don't really catch up on those. Those rounds don't get made up in June. But we continue to have good solid operations out there. Solid waste, we're running ahead of last year. We increased the assessment to move forward with some of those 75 and 5 to get to the 75%. Had some increased costs there for the recycling program. However, that's bearing fruit. Utilities. We're seeing a slight increase in revenues as we get more new customers hooking up, and our operating expenses are down just a little bit. Fleet continues to roll along. Everything's going well. We're right at break even. We're a little bit above breaking even right now. We're not trying to make money there, just recover our costs. And our total revenues and expenses are down just because fuel prices are down. At the beginning of last fiscal year was before the fuel prices really came down, so we had about 2 or 3 months where the fuel prices were higher. We didn't have that this year. We've had the lower prices, so that continues.
Looking at the enterprise funds, and it's always been a goal of the previous commission, anyhow, of the shooting range being an enterprise activity, and with the sporting clays, that's going to be ready in June. May, June, something like that? Okay.
This summer.
With that, there's going to be a little bit of or they're going to need some money to operate it, obviously. So I'm sure there'll be a budget amendment coming forward. My question is will we know enough about the operations of the Sporting Clays facility to be able to take and to call it an enterprise fund next year, in next year's budget, and do perhaps an interfund borrow for the personnel to run it for the fiscal year, similar to the same thoughts that we used for the irrigation system at Sandridge, where they borrowed the money to go ahead and operate and to install that irrigation system. I really would like to try to get this rolled out of recreation and rolled into an enterprise fund while I'm still here.
No, that's been the goal, and it would be.
Yeah.
Most likely still fall under recreation, but it will be an enterprise fund because you've got the golf course as an enterprise fund, but it's considered, we plan to roll it out into an enterprise fund. And I think Jason's looked at some new, Jason's been looking at the manning and everything else for this, and we hope it's going to become a profitable operation.
Right, yes, we've been working with staff from the shooting range and from recreation to develop that staffing plan, the operating budget going forward. We will bring back a budget amendment in this year to get that ready before the range opens in the summer, before the Sporting Clays course opens in the summer. And then moving forward into the year, it has been our goal to make it an enterprise fund again also. We'll work with the finance department to make a determination on that. We'll explore how soon we can do that. Our latest conversations with them were that they'd want to see it break even before we turn it into an enterprise fund. So we'll have to coordinate that back with the finance department and move
we would have the opportunity, if it opens in June, to be able to see it on a monthly basis. Not on, I know you're talking annual basis, annualized. I get that, but before, when we go into the budget,
we would have, I don't know when that's scheduled for completion exactly. There's been a little bit of movement.
I think it's August right now. The scheduled completion is the end of August.
So right about the time the fiscal year starts?
Yeah.
September 30th. Well,
I think it's well on its way when we get there. I mean, that's been the thought all along. We've been very close. I mean, when you talk about it, we don't have any other recreational type facilities, barring the golf course, that are close to paying their way. There have actually been years, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the shooting range did break even there for a year or two. We're at about 85 to 90%, so it's really close, and our understanding is there's such a call for the Sporting Clays. We anticipate that when that happens, it will reach that break-even status. So that's definitely what we're planning, and we're doing it moving forward. I just think it may be September, October by the time we have the first month data, but we definitely are of the thinking that will be a winner, and it has long been. When you say it doesn't pay for itself, it is right there, and we think the Sporting Clays course will give it that push, definitely.
And it was sold to the residents of Indian River County to be an enterprise fund. So just to try to get that as fast. Do we have any figures on what it would cost them on a monthly basis to operate the facility as far as hard costs with the Sporting Clays?
I think they've developed a budget. We're reviewing it right now. I can't recall what those numbers are. I will say the whole way we'll probably have charity events. People will probably now rent it out for charity events, for shooting and things like that. So we'll have a whole different marketing strategy on it too. I think it'll be it'll be a great amenity to the community, and I think we'll think it'll break even. We're going to work on that.
All right, super. Thanks.
Thank you.
And as we have been doing.
Or Jason's going to work on that. Let me say that.
The Building Department Enterprise Fund, I didn't see it listed.
Yes, we have. We didn't have a list
or a
on
slide.
That, we are up on revenues and it continues to perform strong. If you look at page in the backup, we have.
I know our cost, as you're pulling that up, our cost because of our private providers to keep the level of service high has been eating into the revenue a little bit, but I think it's important to keep the permits coming out and the inspections being done daily, and if that incurs some extra cost, till we can find some full-time staff to add.
Right, and
Is
that's
something
what
we
we
need to
have
do.
been doing. We did, if you'll recall, we brought a budget amendment earlier this year to pay some more of the private providers. It's just easier to staff up with that. We've had a hard time attracting new personnel and retaining the personnel that we have there. So things are going well, which is a good thing, but that creates its hiring problems, and we are moving forward on that. Those private providers allow us to fill the gap and also, cover a lot of the bumps. We think it's a good model to use going forward. Also to use those private providers to cover those peaks that you always have there, and they've really they've been doing a good job for us and have really helped us keep that process
Kept things
moving.
current.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So as we have been doing, just wanted to focus a little bit on a special area at the end of this to kind of provide a little bit of a change up. So we're going to talk about the golf course a little bit today. So as you know, we've got two 18-hole courses, the Dunes and the Lakes. Dunes was built first in '87 and then followed by the Lakes in 1992. You'll recall that we paid off the original debt service to build the bonds to build the course with an interfund loan from the general fund a couple years ago. That is now reaching the end at September 1st of this year. Those bonds will be paid off. So that is definitely a good moment for the golf course, and definitely an accomplishment that we've had a long time coming. We also have, as those courses have aged, there is some R&R that needs to be done. Last year, or a couple of years ago, we redid the irrigation on the Dunes course at a cost of about $1.2 million. We used an interfund loan, about $600,000 from the general fund to cover that. That will be paid off next spring. We have started the design for the Lakes course because by the time next year rolls around, staff anticipates it's time to redo that. We may have a need to do interfund borrowing. We may be able to fund that from operations, but there will probably be a portion of that will need to be interfund borrowing going forward for a couple of years. So this just shows that weekly revenue. So you can see the obvious peaks in the revenues. So you see December, January, February, March, April, very strong. More rounds played at a higher price. And then in the summer, the usage is a little bit lower, and the rates are lower. So that's the normal seasonality of that. We do have the rounds played here annually, about 93,000 last year, which has been relatively consistent the last few years. There was some higher round counts back in earlier days, but we have seemed to leveled off and actually increased from 13, 14, so things seem to be headed in the right direction there. So with that, I'll say thank you and stop talking, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Thank you, Jason. Any questions for Jason? Commissioner O'Brien?
The only question I have is, how does Mike feel about the budget you're handing off to him?
That's a good question. He may.
Unlike other places I've been, I think I've inherited a budget with a very conservative posture, utilizing things like hiring the temporary building inspectors rather than adding full-time staff. I know that's been an issue just in terms of recruitment, but that also gives you a buffer in the event there's another downturn, rather than bringing on a bunch of staff and then having to in turn let staff go in a downturn. That certainly bodes well and makes for a softer landing. Revenue here is budgeted very conservatively, and I think that's a good posture to be in, especially given the somewhat tenuous condition. One day the market looks good and they're talking about the robust economy, and the next day the Wall Street Journal is talking about just the opposite. So I don't think we're out of the woods yet. In terms of the overall fiscal health, there's obviously a lot of concerns overseas with China and the like. So again, the conservative posture, I think, has served this community well, and that's something happy to say I inherited. You know, you've done a good job managing this, and I would expect that to continue.
Great, good, thank you.
Any other questions of Jason? Jason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we'll move now to Office of Management and Budget, declaration of 16th Street ball fields as surplus and authorization for disposal. Mike, you're already at the podium.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Michael Smykowski, the new Indian River County Budget Director. In terms of background on this issue, there have been 2 public discussion items that were brought to the board regarding the 16th Street ball fields, which are located at 1900 16th Street. The acreage is approximately 11.76. The dates of those public discussion items were January 12, 2016 and February 2nd, 2016. Then on February 16th, the board approved an agreement to terminate the existing lease with the tenant effective June 1st, 2016. The Recreation Department has no plans to use this facility after that date. Therefore, staff believes it's in the best interest to declare this facility as surplus. Toward that end, multiple communications to the school board to ascertain their potential interest in this property were undertaken. I'll just give you a brief rundown of the chronology. On January 18th, there was an initial letter to the school superintendent from Mr. Baird regarding the 16th Street ball field properties. There was no response received to that letter. Assistant County Administrator Mike Zito sent 2 emails to the School Director of Facilities regarding the ball field properties. The school expressed interest in a potential swap for an easement for sidewalk construction near Sebastian River High School. On April 12th, the board gave policy direction to the county administrator to proceed with disposal of the property. On April 20th, Mr. Baird sent a second letter to the school superintendent noting the board policy direction to proceed with selling the property. Again, no response was received to this communication. Recognizing that we were going to put this on the agenda today, last week, Mr. Baird on May 4th sent a final letter to the school board. Within the context of that letter, it was further noted that the board had expressed no interest in a proposed land swap. On May 5th, we did receive a response from the school superintendent, again expressing an interest in the property swap for the sidewalk easement. We felt it was important to that if we were to proceed with disposal of this property, that the land use and zoning were certainly pertinent information relative to that. The land use is government and institutional use, and facilities. Governmental facilities include administration buildings, cultural facilities operations, and correctional institutions. Also included are public and private educational facilities, hospitals, transportation terminals, including small-scale recreation facilities compatible with and subordinate to an existing governmental utility. These are from the City of Vero Beach land use, because the property is located within the city. In terms of zoning, it's zoned R1. Permitted uses include single-family residential, community gardens, accessory structures, and facilities. Those are included in your package. In terms of density, under the R1 zoning classification, the City of Vero Beach zoning has a minimum lot requirement of 7,500 square feet. So at the 43,560 square feet per acre, that's slightly below 6 units per acre would be the allowed density on that property.
Is that in the comp plan? You said it was zoned institutional. But, so I'm
No,
imagining
the
future.
land use designation was governmental institutional, the zoning is R1. I will tell you,
You're not a.
land use is not.
I can tell you, as you were
exactly
going
my
through it there.
wheelhouse, so Mr. McCoy is here representing
I believe the land use is
community
institutional, and probably in the comp plan, it's, future land use is the R1, John, is that right? Or is it zoned currently R1?
Their comprehensive land use plan designation is the governmental institutional, is the underlying land use. And then the zoning is actually the R1, which is residential, which allows the residential single-family use and the community garden use. So,
I'm confused, John. I mean, so it is zoned institutional.
it is zoned R1.
It is zoned R1.
Correct.
And so the use is institutional.
The underlying land use is governmental institutional.
How in the world do you have something zoned, something that's
Wesley,
not in the comp
this
plan?
is the city of Vero Beach.
You understand my confusion?
Yes, and their governmental institutional does allow the R1 as a zoning district within that land use category. So it's.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Okay. We don't do that, do we?
We do not have similar designations.
I mean, we have institutional, we have an RS6, but you would not be able to, is it a special exception or special use, administrative approval, or allowed?
There are conditional uses that they would allow in the R1, such as some of the uses that you see over there. For us, the closest would be the public land use. And again, it allows a variety of zoning districts within that public, but again, it steers it towards a public use.
Public use, not a residential use. Okay, I guess really what I'm getting at the end of the day is if there's some zoning questions, in order to get the highest and best use out of this piece of property for the county, if there's any issues about what they can utilize this property for, as far as get it to the point that it's an entitled property versus it being something that they would have to buy and then get it entitled, it would behoove the county to step through that process and offer a finished product at the end of the day.
It may, but it depends on the desire of the prospective purchaser and what the prospective purchaser may want to use it for. So if you have a prospective purchaser that wants to use it for an institutional use, there may not be many things that need to happen. If you have sort of a conventional private sector developer that wants to develop it as a residential project or increase the density or other things, then they would probably need to go through a variety of changes in both in land use and zoning.
And going through that process, every one of those processes somebody's got to go through is going to hurt the value of this property.
Exactly.
And
Wes, I think the R1 is a permitted use.
Right.
So that would establish your highest and best value, I think.
Which would be low.
It's under 6 units per acre.
Right, so somebody's going to give you a multiple of that number. So I kind of see it as 2 points, and stepping back, there's the St. Francis Manor issue, and I'll move into that in a minute, but yes, you're right, if we moved it to the RM 1012, that at least makes your multiple from a purchaser against 10 to 12 units to the acre versus 5 point.
I don't think that's in the comp plan, so I don't know that that's the equivalent of asking for a commercial zoning on a piece of residentially future land use property.
Right. So I mean, the high school sits on the same R1 property, but if we don't do something, somebody's going to value it at what it is, and what it is, the way it's entitled, is going to yield a very low number.
Well, the way I understand it, the way it was just described, though, is it's institutional zoned, and in the institutional zone,
but for government.
Government, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Land use.
Land use, that's the land use.
Right.
And in that land use designation, you have R1, which is a permitted use of, which is their 7,500 square foot lots, which is our equivalent of RS6.
Correct.
Which, by the time you get finished with our land development regulations, you're not going to be RS3.
You're a little over 3 units per acre
Right.
by the time you get the rights of ways and the stormwater.
Stormwater
accommodated and
retention,
things like
supplement
that.
set-asides, and yeah.
And nobody's going to, in their right mind, would put a single-family development next to the football stadium across from the high school that close in when you're surrounded by RM 1012 and the Boys and Girls Club, great facility, St. Francis Manor, which is at RM 13. That's what they're going to pay you for.
Yeah, well, but they would have to literally go get a comp plan change in order to make that happen. And I don't mind, I don't mind having some, if a developer buys it, them do that part of it, as far as going through a comp plan change. I just wanted to make sure that you could use it for a residential purposes that way, because if not, the only thing it could be a church or school, et cetera, kind of thing.
It depends on the prospective purchasers and desire as to what changes they'll need to go through with the city of Vero Beach.
Right.
So I think if we sell something surplus, does it have to be sold by the bid process, or would we accept a contract that says, I'll pay you X, subject to getting their land use change, and we would wait, give them X amount of time to get that? That would yield us a higher value, I would think.
I mean, under the statute, under 125.35, essentially you have the sealed bid process. That's what you have. I guess if the commission was interested in going through a comp plan and rezoning.
Oh, not us, but to create the opportunity for somebody to say, I will pay X if I can get the change, and then you wait for them to go through the change. If it's a sealed bid, it will be like most things sealed bid. It's going to yield you a very lower value, I would think.
The statute just contemplates the sealed bid concept. It doesn't really, unless you were to adopt an ordinance otherwise that established alternative methods by which you unload real estate. Currently, right now, under the statute, it just simply is the sealed bid process.
Sealed bid, public outcry, auction, or give it to a charity. Those are the three options.
Right. Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Dylan, but the board ultimately, we would be bringing, if you went to sealed bid and, there was a bid received and we brought it forward, ultimately as the board, we would be bringing it to the board for ratification and approval. So you have a right of refusal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shifting back to the St. Francis Manor topic, since it appears to be that the radio tower that we surplused and the guide wires that connect to the ground prohibit their plan of adding the 2 additional buildings, or at least that was a prior conversation I think they came here and said, is if it turns out we're selling the tower for, I don't know, did we ever get a written offer, Joe, on that? I know I heard a $400,000 number.
Well, we're finalizing those plans. I've talked to Bill. He's working on that, and we're going to get that get that through as soon as possible.
So if that goes through at that, then that really prohibits them from being able to add the buildings that they wanted to add when we did the Boys and Girls Club portion and then St. Francis Manor portion, or at least we'd get that clarified from them, but that's what was mentioned to me, that because of the guide wire access of those things, they can't really fit a building in there like they thought they could, is to carve out a portion of this so that they would have the ability to add their additional buildings that they wanted to add that they thought they could put in on the shared land swap with the Boys and Girls Club, but with the tower there, it keeps them from being able to add anything.
I would like to point out, the group that showed an interest in the tower, it was a sizable amount of money.
That's why I'm saying take that money, put it in the bank, but then is there a way to accommodate in this piece that we would surplus a piece of that so that they could build that extra 14-unit apartment building on their site?
See, when we start doing this, you're really eroding the value of the property. They could bid on the whole piece, actually.
Yeah.
They could bid on it. But you might have nonprofits bid on this.
But they don't want the whole piece. They want their support services, their kitchen, their library, those things. The 2 extra buildings kind of then puts them at 100%. They wouldn't have a use for the rest of it.
I don't think the city of Vero Beach allows for splits.
They probably don't.
Their policy is different than ours as far as if it hadn't been split since 1983. That you have a one-time split.
Or maybe.
I am not familiar with the subdivision or property division criteria in the city regarding that parcel.
And then last question that I had brought up a few meetings prior was when we sell something, the 17th Street parking lots, the final determination what happens on the Ocean Drive parking lot, the triangle at Indian River Shores, is I was hoping we'd come to some agreement that when we sell something that we are putting into this pool, that there would be some understanding of how we might spend the money. A portion of it goes in the bank, a portion of it goes to catch up prior recreational commitments from projects that we've done. A bigger portion might go to replacing or adding capacity at existing other county fields that we have to kind of divvy up that money, or at least come up with a formula that we would decide how to spend it. So if we sell or surplus something else, my goal is to try to add to something that we have that complements another facility versus it just.
Yeah, that's a board decision. You're
Right.
welcome. I think once we get the money, you can make that decision once you receive the bids.
And that also would apply potentially to the Windsor $1 million too, that's still there and not committed. I mean, it could be two different formulas, but you might come up with one that does both, that brings money into all the areas of need.
On this one, Commissioner, there was some talk prior of some other ball fields in the county that are not quite up to whatever league standards. So for myself, I'd have no problem with using some portion of this to get those fields up to those standards. And if there are other properties that we have in both Parks and Recreation, which we've sort of underspent on over the last years during the Great Recession, so I'd have no problem basically allocating this to make up for those type of things.
Where I am on it is, I would like to view it as a no net loss. I mean, I understand we're giving up recreational land, but it's with the use of that recreational land that it would be the net loss to me, and we're losing 2 fields. So I in a similar vein of what you're talking about as far as updating existing, with the thought of updating existing to where you were adding actually capacity for where children, just in case the school board decides to make all that parking lot, the community's going to lose 2 fields. And to have it as a no net loss to me, 3 fields, thank you, 3 fields. So that very well may include going up to somewhere like Hobart where we have 2 fields now and putting in a quad there.
Well, that's exactly the type of thing I'm saying. If we can do it on existing land and basically make existing land more valuable to the community as a whole.
Go ahead and say it, no net loss. Join me, Bob. Join me. Join me.
Yeah, until I see the full definition. So any other questions for Mike? Mike, thank you. We'll go see if there's anybody in the audience who wants to speak on this issue. Name and address for the record, please.
My name is Derek Muller. I'm the president of the Indian River Sports Complex and president of the Cal Ripken Youth Baseball League in town. And our lease is the one that's terminating on June 1st. And under that no net loss kind of connotation, I would ask that you guys would consider, until such time that it's sold, swapped, or whatever's done with it, that maybe we kind of extend the agreement that we have now. Because what's going to happen on June 1st is the county's going to have to take over 7 electric meters, 2 water meters, 2 sewer. It comes to at rest. Now this is using 0 electric per month. It still costs about $500 a month. We would be willing to, keep that going in the effort, because what happens at the end of the day, as we've discussed many times, like I have 32 teams in the league right now. So on any given night, you have 8 teams playing on Thompson and Michaels Field. That leaves 24 teams with needing a place to practice. And that's kind of what we use the facility for. I would like to continue to do that until such time that it sells, whether it's 6 weeks, 6 months, a year. And this might be something that might be beneficial, using the land while it's going on. And I do want to clear up something, just because I have talked to some of you guys individually, and just other people have a misconception, I think, sometimes, because we have about 40 practices a week going on those fields out there. And I think a lot of people have this conception, a perception that we're making all sorts of money on it. I want to be very clear that when I have league teams playing out there, those 32 teams, when they're practicing out there, there's no charge. It's just a cost of the league. I'm facilitating places for people to practice. You're asking volunteer coaches to pay if they do the rental model. I don't do that, so we don't do it. The only people that ever pay out there, I don't charge for the usage unless they're using the lights, and that's non-league people, like private entities, like a private travel baseball club. If they want to use it, if they use it 5:30 till like 8:30 until the lights go out, I don't charge them, as long as a team is not scheduled. Don't charge them anything. If they use lights, that's the only thing we ever ask them to pay for. So I just wanted to clear that up. I just want to make sure, because I think some people had this idea, like, we got 40 practices a week, we're making $30 a practice, $1,200 a week, and that's not the case. I just wanted to get that kind of cleared up. But going forward, you know, I would just suggest that maybe we just extend the status quo, if you will, until such time as the stuff is sold, trade, you know, swapped, or whatever you decide to end up doing with it in the meantime.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dirk.
Anybody else in the public wish to speak on this matter? Gentlemen?
Mr. Chairman, with Derek, I don't have any real issue with doing this, you know, like on a month-by-month basis, as long as, you know, as long as the parents are very clear, you know, I could go away in a very short notice. I don't want to get a lot of calls from angry parents saying, hey, you know, we just paid for a year or whatever, and now you've yanked this out from us. So I want to make sure the parents are well aware that it's a month-by-month lease. And two, I know restroom facilities has been an issue, so if you're going to carry the lease, you'll be providing the facilities?
Correct, yes. Those two things that I fully understand is, you know, there's always that perception out there. I can do that as league president, getting it out there, just telling them, and you know, that the property's being sold. Until then, we're using it, and that's the agreement that we have. So you won't get that kind of a backlash whenever this does terminate. And then, of course, with us continuing to use it for practice facilities, I would have the porta potties out there. We would continue to pay for those, and that'd be for use for everybody out there, kind of the way it is. We just kind of continue everything on. The termination date would just be whenever you guys sell it.
Okay.
And do that. I understand that.
Joe, do you have a problem with that?
You know, I'll ask my staff, you know, not really. One of the things we're also started to maintain it, and I think that they should maintain it. We were cutting the grass and everything that.
Well, I'm with you, but what I'd
They
like to
should
see
maintain
is
it fully.
let's just kind of keep it just like it's going until we're maintaining it, helping them a little bit. The least uncertainty we can do out there right now, fine, until we have something to where we can make an educated decision here. We don't have that yet, and so I'm in favor of let's just get along to get along, and keep doing what we're doing, and let the board move forward with this, and assuming we'll get some bids, and we'll make a decision about yes or no. And then we can come back, and it's going to be the uncertainty with the parents that's going to bother them the most. And so let's not go and shake up the snow globe just yet. Let's.
To be fair, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know today is, to be fair, today is about the surplus property issue, not the usage of it at this time. But I have to agree, and I appreciate your presentation, Derek. And we spoke, and I agree with a lot of what's been said so far. But, you know, a lot has ensued, and there was a lot of castigation, a lot of blame reverted back to the county about not providing. I mean, that was the very nature of the contract separation. You know, they're not doing this, they're not providing this for us, and a lot of that blame came from the internal mechanism. And, you know, we felt it. And the taxpayers don't deserve to have a piece of property and being blamed for something that the operators should be committed to do. So, but in talking with you, you know, the bottom line is I think we need to bring this back to the next agenda just to vet it all out, because there's one thing that really concerns me. All of the children, all of the youth that are depending upon sports for recreation and therapy are not getting it or are at risk because of a contractual agreement, a violation, and you know what? We have to think beyond that. So I'm fully supporting that your leagues continue playing on the team. As a matter of fact, I would recommend, you know, because it's a short period of time, and this may very well sell quickly, or it may be many years. But in that, the uncertainty, I don't know necessarily if you should be paying the customary rate. I think it should be reduced, because you may be forced to move to another facility within months. And that will be a disruption to the parents, to the youth that are playing, and to the organization itself. Again, there was a lot of rough decisions that were made in respect to the fields. And I think we had to do more than just step up to the plate to ensure that they were maintained properly. I think that the league gained from the agreement substantially. And there were many times that staff had to say, all right, we'll throw into it, we'll do this, we'll bring in more resources. And I, it was right down to the lining and the restrooms and just a lack of service. And I think if we can get rid of all of that and just go forward, understanding that this, and I think Commissioner O'Brien said the same thing, he said that the parents have to know that this is not the county saying, you're out. We'll leave that for the referees on the field. We want to say it's good for the children, it's good for the youth. But unfortunately, we're moving on to find a use for the property. And as we discussed, there's other fields that you'll be able to utilize. This is the best served now. So I agree. Mr. Chairman, do you think we should bring this back to another agenda item so we can move on with the surplus property issue?
Or you mean the use of it? Well,
Use
it
of it.
really depends on who makes what motion first, I think.
I think we can just move forward. We can go out to surplus it, and we've got the board direction that we're going to move forward on a monthly basis with the lease with them. I think that's.
And actually, that's pretty much
So
consistent
moved.
with.
Suggest an amendment to the termination agreement.
Yes. And not have a contract. This is a month-by-month
Yeah, exactly.
situation with
Well,
that
we
understanding.
need a contract.
That's
You don't
pretty
want
much
to
what-
without a contract.
Yeah.
So we'll have
But
a
it's a
contract.
month-to-month contract. That's,
Right.
I thought, basically consistent with what Commissioner Davis was saying.
So that's a motion.
So if that's your motion, which is basically to go ahead with the surplusing this property and allow the present tenant to use the property on a month-to-month basis, conditioned on the very express promulgation of the fact that the use of the fields may be terminated at any time.
And no net loss?
Net loss.
Mr. Chairman,
This is
we would
wonderful.
proceed with a sealed bid sale. That is the staff recommendation.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's included in the
That-
motion.
that's
So we
presumed.
have,
I just wanted to
Yes.
clarify.
we have the
bid.
motion from Commissioner Flesher, the second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any other discussion? Commissioner Zork?
Yes. We widened, 16th Street is a county road in the city. It's sort of an odd piece that we have. I'd like to have Public Works tell us what additional right-of-way we might need to clip off the south portion of the property for road right-of-way, and they probably won't know this off the top of their head, is to allow for the widening that we just did on 17th Street east of 14th Avenue and any potentially needed retention ponds. You don't want to sell it to somebody and then 5 years from now we go, we're going to widen 17th Street and we got to go buy it back at a much higher cost and a takings than let's find out
what
what's the right
government's
way we
supposed to
need.
do.
Well, no, not under my watch.
You're shattering the mold.
Well, so if we could get from Public Works their recommendation on additional right-of-way width
And retention.
corner clips and retention, and make sure we make those provisions in there so we're not selling something that we're going to need in the future.
Yes, sir.
So, Commissioner Fleischer, motion so amended?
Yes. So
Second so amended? Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.
thank you.
To the board, I'll then be bringing back an amended termination clause back to the board probably on the 24th to clarify the month-to-month continuing of the use of the property.
Very good, Dylan. Thank you very much. We now move on to Public Works, Outer Continental Shelf Marine Sand, Gravel, and Shell Resources Regulation. Good morning, Rich.
Good morning,
And Mr. Gray.
Commissioners. Rich Burka, Assistant Public Works Director. We're here today to inform you about a proposed rule change by the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management. Indian River County has adopted a beach preservation plan to provide long-term management of our beaches along 22.4 miles of the beach, 15.7 miles, which are listed as critically eroded by FDEP. The county's beach management plan over the last decade has been really successful in critically replenishing the beach erosion due to the availability of beach-compatible sand from upland and offshore borrow sources. The proposed rule change by the Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management may affect that. James has a small slide presentation to give you some insight as to what the rule change is going to be.
Good morning. For the record, James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. As Rich indicated, there's a proposed rule change on the Federal Register right now being proposed by the U.S. Department of the Interior, in particular the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, or BOEM for short. They're proposing to codify an existing lease agreement for use of offshore material borrow sources within federal waters. This rule has been out, or this lease agreement has been out, but the BOEM wants to, again, codify those guidelines relative to use. The proposed ruling would present a non-negotiated or negotiated non-competitive lease agreement. So, for example, Indian River County would go through BOEM with our normal permitting process with the DEP as well as the Corps in conjunction with our normal beach nourishment permitting process. The proposed ruling was listed on the March 22nd, 2016 Federal Register, and BOEM is accepting comments until May 23rd, 2016. So should Indian River County be concerned? Well, as Rich indicated, we have identified upland and offshore beach sources for our beach program over the next 30 to 50 years. Of the relative to offshore sand, the county has identified nearly 8 million cubic yards offshore adjacent to our shoreline. The one in particular, the borrow source in particular that has the most concern relative to this proposed ruling would be our central source, which amasses about 40% of the total, or 3 million cubic yards of material within federal waters. Again, this proposed ruling by BOEM only applies to use of materials 3 nautical miles or greater, which is the federal water limit. So because of these concerns, again, for our long-term strategic beach management plan, staff developed comments that they wanted to share with the board for your consideration as far as submittal to BOEM. The comments are actually located in the backup pages 115 and 116, but can be summarized as follows. Relative to regulatory borrow area sources, currently the proposed rule is unclear if there's going to be preferential treatment for federal versus non-federal projects. As you know, Indian River County is not part of the federal program, so staff was concerned that having a non-federal project, if there would be priority of use of these lease agreements on federal type projects. Another concern and additional backup is in the packet, refers to sediment quality and quantity. For our beach program, analyzing the offshore materials, we went through an extensive and very expensive granumetric analysis of the materials. It's unclear in this proposed ruling if the county were not to get a lease agreement for any reason, or another community, regional county or what have you, came and utilized those materials adjacent to our shoreline, would the county be reimbursed those expenses? So that's unclear. So staff believes that that's a very important comment, again, relative to the use of the material. And some other comments really refer to the existing agreements that are out there. Really, were there any, where are these leases located? Where are these documents available? And also, were there any legal challenges to these prior lease agreements? Just wanted to note that staff actually discussed these comments in your backup with the County Beach Committee, and they unanimously approved submittal to BOEM, essentially. So therefore, staff's recommendation is to approve the staff comments on the proposed BOEM rule changes and authorize the chairman to sign the enclosed. Again, in your packet, there's a draft letter for the chairman to sign and submittal of those comments and that letter to BOEM prior to the May 23rd deadline.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
I think I know how we can stop this dead in its tracks. What we need to do is just require them to do an archaeological survey.
And find some bones.
No.
Some mittens.
There's historical significance of gold in that out there, so we don't know if any of those shipwrecks are going to be affected by this. So we need an extensive.
Be careful what you ask for. They might ask us to do the same thing later on when we want to use the sand.
Actually, I'm going to make them say no, one's not necessary. That way, if we do need it, we can say you already said no, it's not necessary. But this is another example of a regulatory agency changing the rules, and why anybody would want to be involved in more regulatory agencies whenever they can just change the rules on you, just beyond me. But
well, you know, I'm not one of them.
no, I get that. I get that.
Commissioner O'Brien.
James, is there anything in here about priority of who can go, dip into the borrow area? Because that'd be my concern that, again, with like Miami-Dade and some of these counties that have big needs, that it's kind of like, St. John's consumptive water use permits, because we are a slow growth county. We're at the tail end of getting a consumptive use permit, and the Orange and Seminole and the faster growing counties, get the water first. So can you add your comment something about reserving some of that sand for the local community or something? Because I think in most of those borrowed areas, there's good quality stuff and then marginal quality, and the other counties are going to come in and obviously take the higher quality stuff first. So that's going to leave us with the low hanging fruit gone. So just, I don't know, just somehow if there's some way we can preserve at least some vested rights to some of that sand before it's just all, scarfed up, because proportional, that's closest for us. So we'd like to be able to tap into that. So anyway, that'd be my only, addition to the comments, to somehow, if we can't, preserve some of our rights to it, if we can.
We'll include that. Thank you.
And Jason, my only comment is, if the board goes ahead with this, can you find out a real person to send this letter to, as opposed to sir or madam? No, I just really prefer to have a real person, if it's possible.
I will correct that. Thank you.
Gentlemen, what's your pleasure?
Move approval to submit staff comments in the attached letter by the chairman as amended with a person to address it to.
We have the motion from...
Yes, include my comments.
We have the motion from Commissioner O'Brien, seconded by Commissioner Flesher. Any other comments? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. We now have an update. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers proposed plan to dredge and relocate bulk ocean sand from Martin and St. Lucie counties to Miami-Dade County.
Rich Berka, Assistant Public Works Director. Back in January 2016, the board approved a resolution to oppose the Army Corps of Engineers plan to remove and relocate bulk sand from Martin and St. Lucie counties, and the resolution was sent to the Corps. This would give you an update of where we're at, and James has another slide presentation.
Okay. Again, for the record, James Gray, County Coastal Engineer. As Rich indicated, this has been an ongoing concern for Indian River County, as well as our beach committee, and staff wanted to provide a background and an update on where we are right now with this current quote-unquote sand wars type concerns. So just as far as history, back in 2012, the DEP, in partnership with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, conducted what's called a Southeastern Florida Sediment Assessment and Needs Determination, or SAND for an acronym, which is appropriate, study in order to identify large quantities of high-quality offshore sand for beach nourishment. So it seems like it's a perfect timing with this BOEM proposed ruling and so forth. So that's why we wanted to bring it forward. And this SANS needs study was conducted with the mindset of a 50-year project life expectancy, so through 2062. The SANS study included study areas of St. Lucie County, Martin, Palm Beach, and Miami-Dade. Indian River County was not included in the study as we have limited resources offshore and limited federal resources. The study concluded that there were 100 million cubic yards of beach-compatible material available, and again, this is from St. Lucie County south to Miami-Dade counties, of which 5.2 of that 100 million, or 5% of that material, is located in federal waters immediately offshore of St. Lucie and Martin counties. And as I indicated earlier, Indian River County was not included in the SANS study due to our limited resources. So just going on, the SANS study, again, because of federal projects and so forth, identified that counties such as Miami-Dade County are nearly depleted of their beach material, or their offshore and upland sources. So over the next 23 years, Miami-Dade County needs approximately 3.6 million cubic yards of material in order to fulfill their federal life expectancy program. So again, their federal program includes 2 beach projects over the next 23 years with nourishment and initial restoration. So in order for through the permitting process, as most of us are all aware, there's a National Environmental Policy Act that has to be in compliance in order to receive the permit. As such, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers prepared a draft environmental assessment to evaluate removing that identified 5.2 million cubic yards of material offshore of Martin and St. Lucie counties and relocate that material down to Miami-Dade County. The premise behind this, what we see in the newspapers and so forth, the Sand Wars issue. So on March 8th, 2016, the Jacksonville District of the Corps issued a findings of no significant impact, or FONSI, statement, essentially authorizing removal of that material and relocating it down to Martin and St. Lucie County. So therefore, the Corps determined that there were no negative environmental consequences or impacts with removal of this material. Because this is an important issue, our neighbors to the south, as well as potential issues to Indian River County, staff discussed this with our beach committee at the April 18th meeting, and the beach committee still has concerns, as well as staff, that this authorization may lead to our resources being utilized, not necessarily federal, but state material within state and federal resources could be used for our neighboring counties for their beach programs. And so with that, the beach committee made a unanimous motion, and it's lengthy, so I'm going to read it just into record. Approve moving forward with coordinated response with Martin and St. Lucie counties through applicable county regulations to the state and then to federal offices, representatives, Department of the Interior, and the Office of Management and Budget, and request a hearing for open public discussion on the proposal. The committee members also discussed getting Congressman Murphy into a coalition with the counties. To my right, we have Assistant County Attorney Contner here to also add some additional information as we've discussed this internally, and I'll pass the floor over to Kate.
Okay. Good morning. I've communicated with our sister counties to the south, and St. Lucie and Martin, and they are building a coalition. They're trying to reach out actually to the counties to the south of them, Miami, Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach, to see if collectively our voices can be unified to get the federal law to be changed. So really what this comes down to is there's a federal regulation which requires when federal funds are being used, you're allowed to use non-domestic sand only if domestic sand is not available. So as James correctly pointed out, the Army Corps has identified domestic sands that are available offshore of St. Lucie and Martin counties. And so if we were to somehow change that federal regulation and to take off that condition, if domestic sands are not available, then Miami would be able to go nearly 50 miles off their shore to the Bahamas to get Bahamian sand, which I think is what ultimately they want to do. So while this has been shown to be a sand wars locally, in the state of Florida, I don't think that that's really the case. There's a possibility here that we can work together with Miami-Dade and with Broward, because what probably has not been said yet is while Miami-Dade sand reserves have been depleted, so has Broward County. So, and they're waiting to see what happens with Miami-Dade because they're next in line to start doing some of their beach renourishment. So this is an issue that's not going to go away, and I guess I would seek permission from the board to continue working with our sister counties. I've only just been in discussions with them. I haven't played an active role because I have not been directed to do so yet.
So you want to change this from a local sand war to an international sand war?
Whatever you want me to do.
Gentlemen?
Well, yeah, and I think the hang-up is the word available, because there could be sand off North Carolina that's available, but it's not economically feasible. So I think that would be the rule change, that if local sand is not economically competitive to non or foreign sand, then that would let them go to the Bahamas, which would be shorter, 50 miles shorter than 100. So, but yeah, I'm all for having Kate or whoever Dylan wants to designate to work on this. So I'll go ahead and move staff recommendation.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, second by Commissioner Fletcher. Any other questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. We now move on to commission matters. Commissioner Zork.
Yes, I'm going to pass out one additional larger handout so it's a little easier to follow. 3 this way, and I have an extra one for the clerk. It's the same map that's in the backup. Dylan, you can take one, and then there should be 1 or 2 left over at the end. This item is to look at, if you look at the map that's in the backup material, you'll see 3 large circle areas. Those are where the Indian River Farms currently does their monthly sampling draw. Further to the east, we have the smaller ones where we do our grab samples through utilities and public works. And what we're looking at is we have a much vaster system to the west. Let me back up one thing. Indian River Farms does one set of testing that is page 136 in the backup. And to try to understand and definitively identify, if we look at what's in our water in the water column, what is really the contributing true factors of the way our counties run, the way our counties drain, the way our groundwater moves, is when you look at, when we're measuring total nitrogen, we don't know if that's septic nitrogen, animal waste nitrogen, fertilizer nitrogen, atmospheric nitrogen, or any of the other areas that it could be coming from. So looking where we're currently drawing, we're doing a total nitrogen sample in the 3 small circles where they're roughly located. The farms does a bit of a more detailed analysis based on their 298 requirements that they have. So they're getting more information, but again, it's almost where the water gets dumped into the lagoon. We're not far from the ending point. So to try to look at, and actually on the map that I handed out, I've kind of broken this into 2 parts. We have met with, I do stop in to see David Gunner probably monthly at his office just to see what's new and exciting in the water world. And I asked him a question. I said, is there any particular areas of the system that you maintain that you're having to go back and maintain at a much higher frequency basis, or things are growing for an unexplained reason? Why is this area growing? What's the cause of where they're having to go back sometimes 2 and 3 times more often than they do the rest of the system, that there has to be a contributing source of phosphorus and nitrogen that's making the plant growth in these canal areas grow at a much higher rate to where they're having to go back and maintain more, spray more. So one first part of this request would be is since we know we have at least 4 areas that they've identified through their maintenance operations, that there's something contributing to these areas, and if so, what is it and where is it coming from, and what do we do once we find out who's sort of the responsible? Is it change of a ordinance and operation, a procedure? Is it a facility? Is it legacy load that's left over from prior decades of other ag operations? So to look at these 4 areas, one, what is causing these higher maintenance issues? To put our finger on, are we part of the cause? Is it a operation? Is it a legacy load from groundwater leaching from old ag operations? So that's one. Secondly, with all of our sampling being taken kind of at the eastern part of the farm's network, I would really like to know in the planning if where the water starts from the furthest west, is if we had samples starting from the west going to the east, are we showing increases in our load, or is the load starting at the west maintained as it goes to the entire system? Again, logic would tell you, or you would think that as you would go from non-residential, non-septic tank field areas, and you start moving into that you would start seeing these incremental spikes as you would get further east to the current data collection points. So I'd ask staff a few questions, and what I'd like to do is have staff, if there's some consensus on this, is to bring back how many points would we need to check to get a better understanding on an ongoing basis further west of the current collection points we have. How many points is that? Is that 9 additional draw areas? Is it 15? Is it 6? Whatever the number is that they would come up with. And then out of that, once a quarter, or again, depending on what the cost would be, is once a quarter do an actual really detailed analysis of the water sample to look at what are the signatures of the different common sources, and then start plotting and keeping track of that data to know, okay, this month it was 40% septic. This time it's a different number. This time it's higher on the ag contributing factor. This time it's fertilizer. This time it's, since we get total nitrogen, but we don't know whose nitrogen it is or where it originated from. So 2 parts. One is to do initial testing just on the 4 areas. I think once those are understood, those wouldn't be part of the ongoing measure. And then Vinny had pulled up I said, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We don't want to create a new test. What are some tests that other areas that they have done? And I think Martin County or was it St. Lucie County, they had some type of testing that would give us information to know who are our truly contributing sources, because I don't think we've ever done grab samples on water to say this is what the fertilizer nitrogen component is, this is what the other components are. Also, it would tell us as the water moves from west to east, what impacts is the fertilizer ordinance making as it transitions into the season? Is it working better in some areas of the county, less than others? So my request would be is to have staff bring back a cost analysis. What would it cost to look at the 4 areas and then the rest of the district's canal network at an ongoing basis at monthly or quarterly, whatever the testing company that they work with, frequency and cycle that they would recommend to us.
But I thought there were 3 things.
No, or 2.
There are the 4 areas.
The 4.
The west to east, and then the type of nitrogen.
Well, true, in the testing, depending on the cost, if you're doing it if you're sampling every month, whether it's every 4th month, or excuse me, every 3rd month or every 6th month, do a detailed analysis of the water sample. They're more expensive, so I don't think you want to do them every month.
No, I understand, but those are 3 different things, and the cost would be 3 different
They bring back
parameters,
three
so
different
that's-
approaches, yes, that's correct.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Yeah, Commissioner Zork, this is, I think, a great idea here. What I would recommend is, I think trying to do all 4 sites properly might become cost prohibitive. So my recommendation for
Sure.
you to consider is, I'd pick one of them and then just nail the tar out of it. And instead of once a month, almost go down to weekly or daily, and really get a handle.
On the 4?
No, just on one of them.
Okay.
One at a time, and just
Okay.
really intensely look at one, put all of our resources into getting a much bigger data set for that one source. And I would also put in, if you do that, I think it's critical to put in a rain gauge network. So,
Because it could be different.
because we know how rain is here in the summer, it's across the street, it's
It's-
pouring, and over here it's dry. So I think it's a great idea, a great concept, but I think we would get better information if we just focused on one area at a time and did it more intensely and get more data to nail it down. Then, once we've got that one figured out, we could maybe shift to another one. But I would focus on really intensely looking at one site and get it nailed, and do the rain gauge network and really dial it in.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Sorry. So just so I have this right, the red areas were what you were proposing to test?
Well, the red areas are the ones that are a much higher maintenance frequency for the district, that there's something that's feeding that.
When you say maintenance, that means they got to go either herbicide it more or manually?
Drag line it or whichever.
Mechanically remove vegetation, okay. All right, and so you're talking about then, going along the same lines of what Commissioner O'Brien is saying, it looks like here to the,
There seemed to be a commonality of potential golf courses in some of these, with the exception of the one off of 8th Street and 74th, or excuse me, west of, I think he gave me actually, the center of was 8th Street and 85th Avenue is how they have it plotted on their maintenance area.
I see what you're saying. To the north, it would be our golf course and several others.
Right.
To the south, it would be Vista. And
Indian River Club
Yeah.
to the south.
Which
So I think some of these are probably golf related, but the one at their logbook, and when I kind of shaded that length of the canal, there's no golf courses west of 82nd Avenue on 8th Street that would be, so if I was going to pick one, I'd probably pick the non-likely golf one. Because the golf ones, there's probably something going on at the golf course, whether their retention ponds overflow into the canal. So even though they're doing best management practices, they're applying it correctly, but it's getting stored up in the ponds, and then the ponds overflow.
And I know Indian River Club is getting all of our reuse water from South County Treatment Plant.
And that still could be the same thing. So if we were to pick one, I would probably pick the 85th Avenue area and 8th Street, because it's a non-golf associated kind of hot area.
So you're kind of just taking a step from empirical information or data that needs to be that there's higher system of maintenance, and then trying to do something quantifiable on the other side to determine, okay, yes, in fact, it's got something higher here than it is.
There's a food source for the material to be growing at a much faster rate.
Food or soil.
Oh, food or soil, right.
Or just growing conditions. I mean, there's other variables other than just nutrients.
So if we took one to drill into that and see, and then once that's determined, I think the part of looking at the farm's canal system in general and picking up some additional points, that what we're doing from the ArcLet or ArcInlet, which I know we're looking at some more western and I think northern portion areas. We just have a lot of canal areas that we don't quantitatively
You know what's on
measure
that 8th
as it
Street though?
goes.
8th Street is our wastewater treatment facility in that area.
Yeah, but it really shouldn't be that, but.
Well, I don't know because.
No, we don't know, but I'm just saying, because we don't have much of anything of overflow. I mean, most of that goes to the golf courses to the north, and we don't even put anything into the wetlands behind it for probably more than 6 months a year, only a couple dates. times a year than we actually putting more water into
Yeah,
it.
but I can look at the vegetated growth in there and tell it's high in phosphorus, I think, because of the cattails. Exactly. And water that's not high in phosphorus does not grow cattails. It grows sawgrass as that type of vegetation.
Really? Is that true?
What's that?
Is that,
Yeah. Go out to, a good example of that is go out to Garcia's
Uh-huh.
and look on the south side of the boat ramp.
Right.
And you'll see sawgrass. Look on the north side
Little
and you'll see
cattails.
cattails. And in fact, you can even go to the east marsh over there in an airboat, and the closer you get to the west, or to the west side of it, there's cattails. Further you get over to the east side of it, it turns into sawgrass.
you know, you should organize an airboat tour out there for all of us, and we'll bring somebody from the
I did
press
that once.
along.
Y'all weren't on here, were you? Nobody was on here for that. We might have to have a District 1 tour.
I think so.
I think there was a sunshine
we'll bring along-
regulation that
We went.
got
We'll
in the
bring
way.
along- we'll
You
bring
went
along
on
the
your
press.
own.
Henry
Five
Stevens.
votes.
We'll bring along the press.
Yeah, we brought
Well, I
Henry.
think we have a motion from Commissioner Zork. Do we have a second?
Right.
Second it.
We have a second from Commissioner O'Brien. Any other discussion?
What, do we want staff to, since we're only
Yes.
looking at one, bring back the cost?
Staff
and-
needs to bring back their recommendations from it. I think they understand what we're trying to accomplish, and they might be able to add to it with their own knowledge and stuff and bring back something which they feel is appropriate. And maybe some choices, so we can take a look and pick what we feel based on their choices and expertise is the best. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. And with that, gentlemen, we just made it into the afternoon.
I'd like to make a motion.